Chapter 891. The sky gradually darkened. Yu Qianqiu slowly turned around on the rooftop, scanning his surroundings. Although he didn't see anyone from the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, since Wei Chuanqiu had said this, it must be true that someone was watching him. I really have nothing to do with the Thousand Swords Demon Monarch. Yu Qianqiu shook his head helplessly. A person who's been dead for God knows how many years can still cause such a commotion. This Thousand Swords Demon Monarch didn't die in vain. What does the great bright will wielder want to know? I want to know why you can control 10,000 swords. A voice came from behind him. Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned his head and saw a thin, golden-robed Demingluan appear behind him without him noticing. Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng's expressions were normal. Clearly they already knew that the great bright wheel was here. Greetings to the great bright wheel wielder. Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands and explained. I'm just a vagrant cultivator with slightly better luck. I really have nothing to do with the Thousand Swords Demon Monarch. The great bright wheel coldly interrupted. No one cares about your background and luck. I don't want to hear this, and the immortal emperor won't listen to this nonsense. No matter how noble your background is, it means nothing to him. Don't beat around the bush. Just explain clearly why you can control 10,000 swords like the Thousand Swords Demon Monarch. Then what should he say? Yu Qianqiu was startled. There was such a person in this world. A person who didn't care about the cause and effect, and only wanted the final answer. Was this person still human? He couldn't help but look at Wei Chuanqiu. Wei Chuanqiu seemed to see through his doubts and transmitted. There's nothing strange. Immortal Emperor Jin Tai has ruled the immortal world for so long. There are very few things that can interest him. I just heard from the Great Bright Wheel that immortal Emperor Jin Tai doesn't care about anything. Most of the things are handled by his subordinates. He only cares about the final result. If anyone dares to lie to him, he will kill them once he finds out. Seems like a poor fellow who has lost the joy of life. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and said, the sword technique I'm practicing is called Guthyuan sword technique. It has nothing to do with the legendary Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. Is that okay? Guthyuan sword technique? The three of them pondered for a moment. They seemed to have never heard of this technique before. The Great Bright will then asked simply, how can you prove that what you said is true? Yu Qianqiu was prepared for this. He took out a jade archive and handed it over. This is the Guthyuan sword technique that I'm practicing. If you don't believe me, you can verify it. Demingluan took the jade archive and examined it. He confirmed that it was indeed a sword technique. He didn't care whether Yu Qianqiu agreed to it or not. He put it away and said, it's hard to tell if it's real or fake. I'll keep it for now. If I can confirm that this sword technique can truly control 10,000 swords, I'll send someone to return it to you. Wei Chuanqiu frowned and said, Great Bright Wheel, I'm afraid that's not appropriate. A cultivation technique is the foundation of a cultivator. It's the most important thing to keep a secret. In order to prove his innocence, he's already taken it out for you to see. You still don't believe him? You still want to take it away? To the Immortal Palace. As long as the Immortal Palace needs it, they have the right to pry into any secret in the immortal realm. The Great Bright will said indifferently. Wei Chuanqiu was instantly enraged. Yu Qianqiu hurriedly pulled him back and said, this sword art is actually just a facade. The 10,000 swords might look quite frightening, but it's actually just for show. It doesn't have much power at all. If you want to take it, then take it. As long as you can prove my innocence, you don't have to return it. Anyway, I've made a few copies here. Actually, the sword technique he was practicing was modified. The one he gave to the Great Bright Wheel was the original version of the supporting Immortals Island. It didn't matter if he wanted it or not. Even if he took 10,000 steps back, it was necessary to sacrifice something in exchange for his innocence. After exchanging some pleasantries, Wei Chuanqiu suddenly said to Yu Qianqiu, go on with your business. We have some private things to talk about. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the three, cupped his fists, and left with a stomach full of complaints. He didn't know what these three old fellows were plotting. They actually wanted him to leave. After watching him leave, Wei Chuanqiu said with a worried expression, Great Bright Wheel, tell me honestly, will immortal Emperor Jin Taishan believe it? Whether or not immortal Emperor Jin Taishiang believes it depends on the attitude of the two of you. The Great Bright Will said indifferently. Wei Chuanxiu and Yin Peng looked at each other in confusion. Wei Chuanxiu asked suspiciously, "What do you mean?" "Nothing." The Great Bright Will slowly turned around and placed his hands on the white jade railing. He silently stared at the crescent moon that shone with silver radiance for a while before asking, "Yin Peng has always been cultivating in White Cloud Mountain, and you have disappeared for so many years. What I don't understand is why the two of you would appear in such a manner to serve Yu Qianqiu. What's his background to be worthy of you doing this? What's the relationship between the two of you? For the sake of Yu Qianqiu, is it really worth it for the two of you to involve yourselves in this matter? If he really is related to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord, you should know what the consequences are." Yin Peng's calm gaze flickered as he stared at the Great Bright Wheel. Wei Chuanxiu frowned and said, "Didn't Yu Qianqiu even take out his own cultivation technique? I don't think it's fake. With this kind of irrefutable evidence, how can we not prove that he's related to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord?" "Irrefutable evidence? You mean this?" The Great Bright Wheel, who had both hands on the white jade railing, turned around and took out the jade archive that Yu Qianqiu had given him. In front of Wei Chuanxiu and Yin Peng, he crushed it into powder. Wei Chuanxiu exclaimed, "Great Bright Wheel, what do you mean by this?" "What do you think I mean?" The Great Bright Wheel snorted coldly. "So what if it's irrefutable evidence? Do you really think that the immortal Emperor Jin Tai would go through so much trouble for the sake of a mere Yu Qianqiu? I can tell you without a doubt that he would rather kill the wrong person than let him off. 3 days. Within 3 days, the news will definitely reach his ears, and within these 3 days, he will be waiting for news from me. If he doesn't hear from me within 3 days, then 3 days later, the Immortal Palace enforcers will depart from the Immortal Palace. Needless to say, Yu Qianqiu's death is certain. The entire World Commerce Chamber of Commerce will also face a massacre, including those who are close to him. Not a single one of them will survive, and because of my incompetence, I will also be punished." The exceptionally enchanting moonlight instantly turned cold and gloomy. At least, that was what Yin Peng and Wei Chuanxiu felt at this moment. They were among those who were close to Yu Qianqiu, but they too would not be able to escape death. After a moment of silence on the cold rooftop, Wei Chuanxiu broke the silence, saying, "Then why did you want Yu Qianqiu to give a reasonable explanation? Isn't this unnecessary?" The Great Bright Will suddenly turned and faced the moonlit mountains outside. He slowly said, "I just wanted to test him. At least let me die in peace." The two at the side looked at each other, not knowing why he would say such a thing. Yin Peng, who had been silent all this time, said coldly, "It's not that serious. Didn't you join the Immortal Palace to live well? Now that you are in charge of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, the word death is too far away from you." The rooftop sank into a brief silence. The Great Bright Will slowly closed his eyes. "Yin Peng, back then, the three of us settled our debts of gratitude and revenge in the immortal world. You should know how many people we offended. At that time, our situation was already precarious. The Immortal Palace recruited us because of this. Do you think I don't want to be free? Do you think I don't want to be free? If one of you had been willing to accept the Immortal Palace's recruitment, I definitely wouldn't have accepted it. However, the two of you refused to join the Immortal Palace no matter what, so I was the unlucky one." "What do you mean?" Wei Chuanxiu asked in confusion. "What does whether we joined the Immortal Palace have to do with whether you joined the Immortal Palace or not?" The Great Bright Will closed his eyes and didn't speak. It seemed like he didn't want to explain anymore. Yin Peng's body shook. He stared at the Great Bright Wheel and said, "Looks like we have misunderstood you all these years. But why didn't you explain back then?" The Great Bright Will opened his eyes and looked into the dark night. He smiled bitterly and said, "If I really explained it back then, I'm afraid the two of you would have fought to join. I wanted to explain it to you later, but you didn't even give me a chance. Later, because of the fierce internal strife in the Immortal Palace, I thought it would be better not to contact you too, lest I hurt you." Yin Peng wasn't good at expressing his emotions. He just nodded slightly to show that he understood. Wei Chuanqiu's head kept shaking left and right. He looked from one to the other and pulled his hair with both hands. he said anxiously. What are you two talking about? Why don't I understand? Aren't you very good at cheating? Yin Peng was sarcastic, but he still reminded him in the end. Back then, we had too many enemies and were chased everywhere. Later, he joined the Immortal Palace, and we immediately became much more relaxed. We didn't have to run for our lives anymore. At this point, Wei Chuanxiu wasn't stupid. Combining what the two had just said, the misunderstandings from the past immediately disappeared. In short, the Great Bright Will had joined the Immortal Palace because he had no choice. They had caused too much trouble, and were chased every 2 or 3 days. In the end, they had provoked more and more experts. Seeing that everyone was about to die, the Immortal Palace had extended an olive branch to them. However, Yin Peng and Wei Chuanxiu would rather die than submit. They were unwilling to join the Immortal Palace and be restrained. As a good brother, the Great Bright Will naturally knew the knot in the hearts of the two brothers. This was because the Immortal Palace was the place with the most tamed immortal beasts in the entire immortal world. They were also immortal beasts, so they didn't like the Immortal Palace. Although the Great Bright Will didn't want to be restrained, he had no choice. In order to protect his life and his brothers, he could only compromise. Who knew that because of this, the brothers wouldn't get along? They had been misunderstood for so long. Today the injustice was cleared. Yin Peng, do you think this guy joined the Immortal Palace to save his life, because he couldn't escape as fast as the two of us? Wei Chuanxiu laughed. Yin Peng, who was beside him, nodded. Under the starry sky, the three of them unknowingly stood side by side in front of the white jade railing. Just like many years ago, a bright moon shone in the sky and the shadows of green and jade wings followed. Chapter 892. With the years of estrangement gone, the three of them stood side by side in front of the white jade railing, and immediately began to talk about everything. Wei Chuanxiu was puzzled and asked, "You just said that Jin Taixiang will have to see our attitudes if he doesn't believe you. What do you mean by that? If Yu Qianqiu is not closely related to the two of you, what does his life or death have to do with me? What does the life or death of others have to do with me? Although the two of you are with him, with my current position in the Immortal Palace, it is not difficult to protect the two of you." De Mingluan looked left and right and sighed. If the two of you really have an extraordinary relationship with him, then I can only do my best to be a guarantor in front of Jin Taixiang and guarantee that Yu Qianqiu has nothing to do with the Demon Lord of Thousand Swords. Yin Peng was not good with words and tilted his head to look at Wei Chuanxiu. But Wei Chuanxiu frowned and did not say anything. In fact, De Mingluan had another hidden meaning, that even if he were to be a guarantor in front of immortal Emperor Jin Tai might not give him face, and might even implicate him. There are some things that I can't tell you now. Let's talk about it when the time is right. In short, Yu Qianqiu is very important now and cannot die. Wei Chuanxiu muttered slowly. It was not that he wanted to hide it from the two of them, but the Thousand Demon Heart Sutra had too many implications. Although the Demon Lord of Thousand Swords was powerful, he was certainly not a match for an expert like the Demon God. Once the 10,000 Demonic Heart Sutra written by Taishu Zheng, who was on the same level as the Devil God, was exposed, no one would be able to have an easy time. At that time, Jin Tai would probably kill everyone who was involved, and would not show any mercy. He did not want Yin Peng and De Mingluan to worry about the matter, until he had absolute confidence that it could be resolved. In that case, I will personally go to the Immortal Palace, and meet the Immortal Emperor to be a guarantor for Yu Qianqiu. De Mingluan said lightly. Yin Peng suddenly turned and asked, "Will there be any danger?" Wei Chuanxiu also looked over and De Mingluan shook his head. There shouldn't be any problems. After all, he has served Jin Taixiang for so many years. However, if one day it is proven that this Yu Qianqiu is indeed related to the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch, then we will be out of luck. He purposely spoke casually, but in reality, he had no confidence in meeting Jin Tai. The main reason was that the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch was truly a taboo to Jin Tai. If not for the fact that the 10,000 Swords Demon Lord was already dead, the Great Bright Will wouldn't even need to think about it. They wouldn't even need to look for Jin Tai. They could just escape together. Before he left, De Mingluan suddenly took out an item and handed it to Wei Chuanxiu, saying, "After being in charge of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance for so many years, it's not like I've come back empty-handed. I accidentally stumbled upon this." With that said, it seemed like he didn't want to see anything else, and turned into a stream of light and flew away. Wei Chuanxiu's little eyes widened, and in that instant, her eyes were filled with tears. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at the thing in her palm and muttered absent-mindedly, "Xiao Yuer." Yin Peng tilted his head to take a look, and his pupils immediately shrank. This was a small blue bat jade pendant that was not even half the size of a palm. Although it was carved with the same ferocious face as Wei Chuanxiu's original form, it was small and exquisite, and had many cute points. Others didn't know what this blue bat jade pendant meant, but Yin Peng and the Great Bright Will were very clear about it. Back then, Wei Chuanxiu wasn't a loner. He had a wife and a daughter. Later on, because Wei Chuanxiu caused some trouble, his enemies came looking for him. Coincidentally, Wei Chuanxiu wasn't around, so his wife and daughter were not spared. It was also because of this that the furious Wei Chuanxiu, Yin Peng, and the Great Bright Will annihilated the entire enemy's family. This also implicated more and more trouble, and the three of them were constantly being pursued, until the Great Bright Wheel joined the Immortal Palace. And this blue bat jade pendant was personally carved by Yin Peng, and he gave it to Wei Chuanxiu's daughter as a gift. Although this little thing wasn't worth much, it was something that Xiao Yuer had always worn. It had been lost for many years, and she didn't expect that the Great Bright Will would find it. To Wei Chuanxiu, it had an extraordinary meaning. To Yin Peng, it also had an extraordinary meaning. Woo woo. Xiao Yuer. Wei Chuanxiu sat on the rooftop and hugged the jade pendant with both hands as he cried his heart out. Yin Peng shook his head, sighing lightly. Knowing that Wei Chuanxiu needed to vent, he allowed Wei Chuanxiu to cry without stopping him. It was fortunate that the three of them had set up a soundproofing barrier before their conversation. Otherwise it would have alerted the entire World Commerce Hall. As the sky darkened, passing by the 6th floor, Yu Qianqiu saw that Mu Tianjiao's group was chatting happily with Lu Yanqing, so he did not disturb them. Instead, he went down to the trading center below. Although there were still quite a lot of people here, it was obvious that there were fewer people than during the day. After strolling from the 1st floor back to the 5th floor, Yu Qianqiu pushed open the side hall's door and walked in. Jing Yuankong, who was settling accounts inside, quickly stood up seeing Huang Xiaolong's arrival. Yu Qianqiu looked out the transparent crystal window, taking in the scene outside with a smile. "How's the situation?" "Up until now, we've sold 30 billion divine-grade spirit stones worth of herbs." Jing Yuankong answered excitedly. He was used to seeing spirit stones in the human world's World Commerce Hall, but he had never seen so many spirit stones. "Only 30 billion? Yu Qianqiu's brows wrinkled slightly. The immortal herbs he put up for sale were valued at around 80 billion, which meant that they hadn't even reached half of the sales. "It's like this," Jing Yuankong immediately explained. "There are many immortal herbs that aren't sold in high quantities. On the contrary, the higher the value, the better they sell. Should we put up some good immortal herbs for sale?" Yu Qianqiu pondered for a moment, then slowly shook his head. "No need. We'll slowly sell the rest of the immortal herbs. We'll sell them for a month. It's better if we can sell them all, but it's fine if we can't. We also pay attention to the method of seeking wealth. There's no need to rush, otherwise, going too far is as bad as falling short." He was well aware that putting up so many immortal herbs was already too conspicuous. If there was a steady stream of good stuff appearing on the shelves, it would be hard not to arouse suspicion. Only by stopping in moderation would they be able to handle the situation with ease. On top of that, the Celestial Ruin Realm had just opened, so they could cover it up. Jing Yuankong immediately understood Huang Xiaolong's meaning, remembering that they had just established a foothold in the immortal world. If they acted too conspicuously, it would only bring trouble to themselves. Jing Yuankong immediately nodded. "Understood. I'll arrange for all the immortal herbs to be sold on the 1st floor tomorrow. You know this better than me. You can decide how to sell the immortal herbs." Yu Qianqiu said a few words, then returned to the 6th floor with his hands clasped behind his back. Inside the everlasting trade hall, for some unknown reason, the elders of the four sects who had supported Yu Qianqiu earlier in the day were gathered together again, each of them wearing a worried expression. After a moment of silence, Wang Gui said solemnly, "Although his methods are similar to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's, that doesn't prove that he's related to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord. Moreover, the Myriad Swords Demon Lord has been dead for a long time." Yafuzi shook his head slowly. "Nothing is absolute. Maybe he picked up the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's cultivation technique and became the Myriad Swords Demon Lord's disciple." Du Kairan, who was sitting at the side, snorted coldly. Whether Yu Qianqiu is related to the Myriad Swords Demon Lord or not is secondary. The key is immortal Emperor Jin Tai. He's a person who can't tolerate sand in his eyes. He won't allow another Myriad Swords Demon Lord to appear in the immortal world. Anything that can threaten him will be eradicated by him. This is an undeniable fact. Today, when we went to support Yu Qianqiu's event, we've undoubtedly dragged the four sects into the water, more or less implicated. The corner of Huo Lianqing's mouth twitched. Could it be that just because we supported Yu Qianqiu's event, the immortal emperor is going to implicate the four of us? Du Kairan said in a deep voice, "It's precisely because we are the four great sects, and not some ordinary small sect, that we came to support a small world commerce association. This is the biggest reason for suspicion. The immortal emperor is a temperamental person. No one knows what he is thinking. If he really suspects us, then how could he give us a chance to explain? He simply doesn't put our four clans in his eyes. If he wants to eradicate us, it would only take a single word from him." Everyone's expressions changed and became unsightly. Wan Gui sighed softly. "If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. And if it's a curse, we can't avoid it. It's not a solution for us to make wild guesses here. We can only take one step at a time. Right now, it's more important to call back those juniors and avoid arousing suspicion. Don't get too entangled with Yu Qianqiu. Secondly, everyone should quickly report this matter to their sects and make preparations early. Otherwise, when disaster strikes, we won't be caught unprepared." On the rooftop of the World Commerce Association, the aroma of barbecued meat and fine wine filled the air again. Yu Qianqiu once again displayed his barbecue skills. As he fiddled with the barbecue, Yu Qianqiu felt a little strange. He saw Wei Chuanqiu sitting by the white jade railing in the distance, his head buried in something, while Yin Peng silently stood by his side. Not long after, the food that Yu Qianqiu had meticulously prepared was placed on everyone's table. Just as everyone was about to eat heartily, someone came up from downstairs and reported to Yu Qianqiu with cupped fists, "Sect Master, Wan Gu Tong, Mythical Fire Palace, and Spirit Cultivation Sect have all sent people over, saying that they have important matters to attend to and ask their disciples to return quickly." Wan Ling and the others looked at each other, not knowing what had happened. Why did the three great sects all send people to summon them? They guessed that something big must have happened and couldn't sit still anymore. They all stood up and left without eating anything. Thus, only Yu Qianqiu, Mu Tianjiao, Lu Yanqing, and Long Xiaojie were left. But not long after, someone came to report that the Hidden Dragon Manor had also sent people to urge Long Xiaojie to return quickly. Seeing that Long Xiaojie had also left, Yu Qianqiu immediately felt a little strange. He frowned and said, "All the sects said something happened. Could it be that something big happened in the immortal world?" Mu Tianjiao and Lu Yanqing looked at each other. They were even more confused. Because the three of them had their own thoughts, the barbecue didn't taste good. In the end, Lu Yanqing still accompanied Mu Tianjiao to rest. Only then did Yu Qianqiu walk over to where Yin Peng and Wei Chuanqiu were. When he barged into the soundproofing barrier, he discovered Wei Chuanqiu sitting on the ground, sobbing. He immediately cried out in alarm, "Bat King Wei, what's wrong? Did Great Brightwell hit you?" Chapter 893. Wei Chuanqiu didn't react to his words, and continued to sit there crying. Yin Peng, on the other hand, turned around and glared at him. Yu Qianqiu shrank his neck slightly. "Senior Yin, what happened to him?" Yin Peng kept his mouth shut and did not answer. But Wei Chuanqiu's sobs kept bouncing out the word Xiaoyu. Yu Qianqiu immediately squatted down beside him and asked curiously, Bat Kingwei, who is Xiao Yuer? Is she your old lover? Yinpeng couldn't bear it anymore and shouted, Don't talk nonsense here, Xiao Yuer is his daughter. His daughter? Yu Qianqiu stood up and said in surprise, His daughter is here? Where is she? Where is she? Is she beautiful? Don't tell me she's made from the same mold as the old bat. As he spoke, he looked around. However, although there were constantly flowing lights in the dark night sky, how could he tell who was who? Bastard! Yinpeng couldn't bear it anymore and roared, His daughter has been dead for tens of thousands of years. Died for tens of thousands of years. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. After a while, he sat beside Wei Chuanxiu and patted his back, comforting him. Bat Kingwei, the dead can't come back to life, my condolences. It would have been better if he didn't comfort him. But once he did, there was a problem. Wei Chuanxiu immediately wailed loudly. Xiao Yuer, Xiao Yuer, it's father's fault. I've harmed you and your mother. What did I do to offend you? Yu Qianqiu only felt his eardrums tremble, and his scalp go numb. He was speechless, and quickly got up to stand beside Yinpeng. How did his daughter die? And what's going on with the great bright wheel manager of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance? Yu Qianqiu picked his ears and asked Yinpeng. In the end, he realized that Yinpeng didn't care about him at all. Instead, he walked out of the soundproof enchantment and seemed to be concentrating on listening to something. Yu Qianqiu was slightly taken aback. He listened attentively and immediately discovered that Wei Chuanqiu's loud cries were accompanied by the faint sounds of a zither. He also stepped out of the soundproof enchantment, and Wei Chuanqiu's cries were immediately cut off. In the quiet night, there was a faint singing sound that sounded like the spirits of a beautiful woman. It was very pleasant to listen to. The sound came from downstairs. I have a flower that grows in my heart. No one understands true love. After Yu Qianqiu heard it clearly, his expression twitched. He knew that it was Lu Yanqing who was playing and singing. Tilting his head to look at Yinpeng, he discovered that Yinpeng's usually calm face had a look of surprise, as if he had heard the sound of nature. Yu Qianqiu looked at Wei Chuanxiu, who was still crying nonstop, and was completely speechless. He realized that he had nothing in common with these two experts tonight, so he immediately flung his sleeves and left. Inside the Wan Gutong branch, Wan Ling was stunned after hearing Wan Gui's analysis. Then she covered her mouth and giggled, gasping for breath as she said, You guys actually think that Yu Qianqiu is related to the 10,000 Swords Demon Lord? Hee hee. Wan Gui frowned, saying solemnly, Wan Ling, regardless of whether the 10,000 Swords Demon Lord is related to Yu Qianqiu or not, based on Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's cold-bloodedness, as long as there is such a possibility, he will be punished immediately. We have no choice but to take precautions. It's better to distance ourselves from him for now. Don't be stubborn. Think about it carefully. I'm going to report this matter to the sect leader. Just as he was about to leave, he heard Wan Ling giggling behind him. Elder, please stay. There's no need to report this matter to grandfather. Don't worry. Immortal Emperor Jin Tai will definitely not pursue this matter, and grandfather will not take it to heart. Wan Gai turned around saying, This matter is not a small matter. If something happens, no one can bear the responsibility. The sect leader has to make the decision himself. Finished. No matter how Wan Ling tried to persuade him, he directly left. Wan Ling could only shake her head helplessly. The reason why she was so calm in the face of chaos was because she knew that Yu Qianqiu was Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's trusted spy. If she knew that Yu Qianqiu was a fake, who knew if she would still be so calm? Not long after, Wan Gai returned with a puzzled expression. Wan Ling smiled at him asking, What is the sect leader's opinion? Wan Gai shook his head in a muffled voice. When he contacted the sect leader to report this matter, Wan Buoxing was only dazed for a moment before asking him what Wan Ling's opinion was. Wan Gui naturally conveyed Wan Ling's opinion to the sect leader, but Wan Buoxing immediately expressed that Wan Ling could make the decision on this matter. Wan Ling, is there an inside story behind this that I don't know? Wan Gui asked suspiciously. Wan Ling shook her head with a smile and said, Elder Wan, there are some things that you shouldn't ask. It won't do you any good if you know. The former immediately choked and became speechless. Although Wan Gai and Wan Ling had the same ancestor, and were much older than Wan Ling, in reality, Wan Ling was actually several generations older than Wan Gai. This kind of phenomenon was very common in the various sects and clans, and the reason for it was naturally because the lifespan of immortal cultivators was too long, and the time difference in carrying on the family line was too great. So the various sects in the immortal dimension would normally stop addressing each other, according to seniority, after a gap of 4 generations, and they would usually address each other by position or name. Of course, positions were not taken according to seniority, but according to cultivation and ability. From this, it could be seen that it would indeed be troublesome if everyone in the family became old fogies. However, it was human nature to have children, and even immortals were never tired of it. In the celestial bestowment state, in the sky above the main peak of the paradise immortal realm, there was a majestic palace that shone with a golden light. The moment the great bright wheel flew into the mountain range of the pure bliss immortal realm, it was immediately subjected to layers of interrogation. However, with the golden sunset token in his hand, his journey could be said to be unimpeded, and he directly flew up to the half of the mountain peak that was floating in the air. The top of the mountain had been pushed to the ground, and the ground was paved with shiny golden bricks, forming a huge golden plaza. There were golden pillars, golden towers, golden arch bridges, and golden railings everywhere. In addition to the towering golden palace in the distance, this was a golden kingdom, a golden world. De Mingluan didn't know why the immortal emperor liked gold so much, but he knew that other than the inner guards of the immortal palace, no one else was allowed to fly in the golden plaza. As soon as he landed in front of the righteous heaven gate, on this golden plaza, 2 golden-robed guards standing with their halberds raised immediately waved their spears to stop him. De Mingluan pushed out a token that shone with golden light with a single palm, and the 2 guards immediately returned to their original positions. Flying was prohibited here, so the great bright wheel could only obediently walk along the main axis straight to the immortal palace in the distance. This was the main path to the immortal palace, and there were railings on both sides with all kinds of immortal beasts carved on them. After walking for a short while, he saw an expressionless person walking over from the direction of the immortal palace. De Mingluan and that person were startled for a moment, then they both revealed a smile and walked face to face. That person was none other than the immortal palace's external affairs great commander Wu Xiong. The 2 of them had a good relationship in the immortal palace. "Brother Wu, long time no see." De Mingluan cupped his hands and smiled. "I heard that you are about to get married, but I have seen your little wife in the illusion immortal city. You are a man, but you found a wife who looks like a spring onion. Aren't you afraid of crushing her? Don't make fun of me. When the time comes, you will definitely drink at the wedding." The short-bearded Wu Xiong smiled bitterly. Recently, there really were many people in the immortal palace who used this to make fun of him. He waved his hand and said, "Why did you come here for no reason? Are you looking for the immortal emperor?" "That's right." De Mingluan smiled, but his eyebrows slightly moved. Who knew what he was thinking when he saw Wu Xiong? "Then there is no need to go to the immortal palace. I just went there, and the immortal emperor is not there. He said he went to the newly built dancing immortal palace below. It just so happens that my wedding day is approaching, and I want to ask for leave from the immortal emperor. Why don't we go together?" Wu Xiong waved his hand and invited. "Oh, what a coincidence. It just so happens to go there." De Mingluan smiled and the 2 of them walked out side by side. Just as De Mingluan was about to say what he was brewing in his stomach, Wu Xiong took the initiative to ask, "As the leader of the Merchant Alliance, you rarely come back. Could it be that something big has happened?" "Something big has indeed happened. This matter might even involve the 2 of us." De Mingluan sighed. Wu Xiong stopped and squinted his eyes. "Brother Mingluan, are you joking or trying to scare me? What kind of big matter could involve me?" De Mingluan smiled bitterly and shook his head. He immediately told Wu Xiong about Yu Qianqiu's fight with someone in the illusionary immortal city. He emphasized the situation of Yu Qianqiu controlling the myriad swords. So this Yu Qianqiu is very likely a remnant of the myriad swords demon monarch. But what does this have to do with me? Wu Xiong didn't react at first, but his expression changed as if he thought of something. Originally, it had nothing to do with you and me. De Mingluan spread his palms and smiled bitterly. You should know that I was once close friends with Yin Peng and Wei Chuanxiu. But what I don't understand is that these two guys are actually together with Yu Qianqiu. Although these two guys aren't very polite to me now, I can't abandon our friendship and watch them die. That's why I took the risk to come to the Immortal Palace to see the Immortal Emperor. And you, I say, your little wife Mu Tianjiao didn't stay at home. She just had to run to the illusionary Immortal City to support Yu Qianqiu's World Merchant Association. She caused such a commotion that everyone in the world knows that your family is friends with Yu Qianqiu. I say, aren't you and your wife looking for trouble? She went to the illusionary Immortal City with my permission. Wu Xiong's expression didn't look too good. He didn't expect to get into such trouble. He stared at De Mingluan and asked, Brother Mingluan, how are you going to report this to the Immortal Emperor? Actually, I've already investigated Yu Qianqiu. I'm very sure that he has no relationship with the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. But he just happens to cultivate a good Yuan sword technique that can control the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch. Actually, this sword technique doesn't have any power at all. It's just for show. It can't compare to the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch's invincible sword technique. Take a look at this. De Mingluan took out the sword technique that Yu Qianqiu had given him. The jade archive that he crushed in front of Wei Chuanxiu and Yin Peng was actually fake. He had put in some effort to reconcile with his two brothers. In reality, how could he so easily destroy something that he wanted to bring to the Immortal Emperor as evidence? Chapter 894. Wu Xiong examined the contents of the Jade Archive. He couldn't make out anything in a short amount of time, but he believed that De Mingluan wouldn't dare to fool the Immortal Emperor with something fake. He threw the Jade Archive back to De Mingluan and said with an unfriendly expression, De Mingluan, what do you mean by telling me this? Are you trying to threaten me? What are you thinking? Do you think I'd threaten you? De Mingluan put the Jade Archive away and sighed. I just want you to be mentally prepared. You might as well postpone your wedding to avoid being implicated. If things go south, you still have to get rid of them when you return. It's just a woman, and there are plenty of women in the world. With our status in the immortal realm, we can get any woman we want. Brother Wu, it's best if you kill her and show the Immortal Emperor your loyalty. After all, you've only known each other for a short while. This will clear your name. As he spoke, he made a throat-slitting gesture. Wu Xiong's face immediately darkened. He stared at De Mingluan and said in a low voice, Are you saying that I should kill my own woman? Brother Wu, you're being too serious. If she really was your woman, how could I say such a thing? De Mingluan waved his hand and revealed an expression of a man who was decisive. She hasn't married you yet, right? She's still some distance away from becoming your woman. Wu Xiong clenched his fists in his sleeves and narrowed his eyes at De Mingluan. Then why aren't you afraid of being implicated? Why are you willing to take the risk to ask the Immortal Emperor to rid Wei Chuanxiu and Yin Peng of suspicion? That's a completely different matter. Haven't you heard that brothers are like limbs and women are like clothes? De Mingluan glanced at the sleeves that covered Wu Xiong's fists and said calmly, Women can be changed, but not limbs. Women can be changed, but not limbs. You're indeed a rare man. No wonder the Immortal Emperor gave you control of such a large merchant alliance. Wu Xiong scoffed. Then how are you going to protect them before the Immortal Emperor? De Mingluan said with a serious expression, I will do my best until my last breath. I will use my life as a guarantee to Immortal Emperor that Yin Peng and Wei Chuanxiu did not know that Yu Qianqiu could control 10,000 swords beforehand. Wu Xiong nodded his head. With his hands behind his back, he slowly circled around the Great Bright Wheel twice. After pondering for a while, he stood face to face with the Great Bright Wheel. He squinted his eyes and said word by word, Brother Mingluan's words about women being like clothes. Forgive me for being unable to agree. De Mingluan was wide-eyed and tongue-tied. Then, he swiftly looked around and waved his hands repeatedly, saying, Brother Wu is talking nonsense, talking nonsense. If someone else were to hear this, then it would be very troublesome. I dare to say such words because I am not afraid of trouble. My woman can be bullied, humiliated, and not abandoned. But that is only limited to myself. It is not up to others. If I cannot even protect my own woman, then no matter how high my position is, I will only be a coward who will never be able to rise again. How would I have the face to live in this world? Wu Xiong pointed at Deming Luan and spoke resolutely. Then, he slowly put his head in front of Deming Luan and said, "Neither too fast nor too slow." Brother of Ming Luan values brotherhood so much. Wu Xiong's heart is comforted. I did not make the wrong friend. You and I have been friends for many years. But why do I feel that in your heart? I am not as good as Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng? Could it be that you do not see me as a brother? Deming Luan was surprised. Why does Brother Wu say this? If we are not brothers, then why would we say such words here? Then why are you willing to risk your life to save Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng when they are in trouble? But you want me to abandon my woman when I am in trouble. Is this something brothers should do? Wu Xiong gritted his teeth and said, comparing the two, since we are both brothers, why do we need to distinguish which is more important? Deming Luan's brows immediately furrowed, and he said in a deep voice, I can risk my life to protect the two of them, and I can also protect your woman and help you solve your problem. But the key is that it is not right for me to protect your woman in front of the immortal emperor. If I really did that, the immortal emperor would suspect you even more. Wouldn't that be harming you? Since you have this intention, why do you need to go so far and give up what is close at hand? Wu Xiong looked around, and a smile appeared on his face as he transmitted his voice. Didn't you say that you have already interrogated Yu Qianqiu and confirmed that he is not related to the demon lord of 10,000 swords? Moreover, you have Yu Qianqiu's cultivation technique as proof. What do you mean? Deming Luan asked suspiciously. Wu Xiong transmitted his voice back. You and I both know the immortal emperor's character. If you want to successfully protect Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng, I'm afraid it will be very difficult, and even your own life will be in danger. I have a slightly better idea. Why don't you try it first? Maybe it can save us from this crisis. Deming Luan's eyes lit up, and he also transmitted his voice back. Since you have a good idea, why don't you say it quickly? Wu Xiong transmitted his voice back with a smile. You first do official business. Don't mention the matter of protecting Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng. Just mention the matter of Yu Qianqiu controlling the demon lord of 10,000 swords. Then say that after your detailed investigation, you have already confirmed that Yu Qianqiu is not related to the demon lord of 10,000 swords. And because I came into contact with that Yu Qianqiu when the Divine Ruin Realm opened, I will use this as a reason to interrupt and put in a good word or two for Yu Qianqiu. The immortal emperor is not a fool. If we say this, he will naturally understand our selfishness. As long as we don't make things clear, it will not damage his impartial style of doing things, and it will not affect his decisiveness in killing in the future. Plus, we have been loyal to him for so many years. Maybe this matter will be left unsettled. In fact, this was exactly what Deming Luan wanted to do. Because he was afraid that one person's weight was not enough, he beat around the bush and pulled Wu Xiong in. Based on his understanding of Wu Xiong's character, he had indeed fallen into his trap. Deming Luan was secretly happy, but his face still showed some worry as he said, Will this work? Why don't we just make things clear? I will protect Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng. You protect your woman. Maybe he will let us go on account of our many years of service. He talked back and forth, but he did not mention protecting Yu Qianqiu. In fact, his purpose in coming here was to protect Yu Qianqiu. There was no other way. Since Wei Chuanxiu had already said that Yu Qianqiu was very important to him, he could only do his best. In fact, Deming Luan was indeed a person who valued relationships and righteousness, but he also knew that in order to survive in the immortal world, it was unavoidable to use the necessary methods. Although some methods were not suitable for his brothers and friends, it was most important to do his best to protect everyone. He was the type of person who had the ability, methods, schemes, and even ruthlessness. It was because of this ability that Jintai picked him to lead the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. However, he was also the type of person who put in the effort for his brothers and friends without asking for anything in return. Because of this, he felt that the long path of cultivation would not be lonely, and he would not let the merciless years gradually make him cold. This was because he knew better than others that the path of immortality was long. No matter how far one walked, no matter how high one's cultivation was, one would still be lonely. And friends like Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng, who could risk their lives for him at any time, were indispensable. It was really good to have their company along the way. Although they were beasts and he was human, sometimes beasts valued relationships more than humans. If he lost a friend like this, he would not be able to make up for it even if he wanted to. So De Mingluan wanted to do his best to protect them. Because such friends had come all the way, they had gone through all kinds of trials and tribulations. Everyone knew each other very well. It was almost impossible to find such a reassuring friend in the immortal world. Chapter 895. On the secondary peak next to the main peak of the Paradise of Bliss, there was a high wall made of green and pleasant jade. The wall was covered with all kinds of flower and bird patterns, and the layers of wavy walls were made of extremely rare pink jade. The pavilions, terraces, and buildings within the high walls were all constructed with various colored jades and jadeites. It was like a colorful crystal palace, exquisite, grand, and extremely gorgeous. A man in a golden robe slowly walked out of the crystal palace and into the four-cornered jade pavilion in the courtyard. He stood there steadily with his hands behind his back. This dignified man with a square face had a complicated hollowed-out golden crown on his head. Two sword-like eyebrows slanted into the left and right corners of his forehead, and the slender eyes under the sword-like eyebrows bloomed with a breathtaking cold light. Under the strong bridge of his nose, the tip of his nose was slightly hooked. His thin lips were tightly closed like two blades, and 3 strands of beard hung on his upper chest. His chiseled face was like 10,000 years of ice. There was not the slightest expression on his face. A superior aura arose spontaneously, making people fearful, and not daring to peek at his true face. The golden robe worn by the tall and straight figure was different from the ones worn by ordinary people of the immortal palace. The golden robe that wrapped around his body was bound by a golden belt, and it was covered with a gorgeous and extraordinary wide golden robe. The robe was embroidered with golden threads that were full of coiling dragons and clouds. It was unknown how heavy this robe was. He was also wearing a pair of thick-soled golden boots. He stood there with the aura of a king. The strangest thing was that his body was faintly shrouded in a layer of faint golden glow. The glow was thin and curled up like a morning mist, faintly wandering around his body. Although this person's aura was extraordinary, it made people feel dreamy and illusory at first glance, giving people a feeling of unreality. If one looked at him in reality, it would be frightening, as if his whole person was always in the dreamy light. Following him was the devastatingly beautiful immortal Lord Ji Wu, and the silver-haired Yi Shuejun, who was dressed in a silver robe, stood outside the pavilion with her head slightly bowed. However, he stood there with an expressionless face. In the immortal world, there was someone who could make these two submit to him, so the identity of this golden-robed man was obvious. Not bad. This person was the monarch of the immortal world, the ruler of all living beings in the immortal world, the immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Jin Tai, who had been silent ever since he entered the jadeite courtyard, silently walked around every corner of the building. Ji Wu and Shuejuan followed behind him, not daring to breathe loudly. They just quietly accompanied him. Although they did not know why he suddenly came, they did not dare to ask. Because this person was temperamental, and took the lives of others to be worthless like ants. He could kill with a single thought, and no one in the entire immortal dimension dared to go against him. Ji Wu, are you satisfied with this place? A loud yet oppressive voice finally came from the person inside the pavilion. Immortal Emperor Jin Tai, who was standing with his hands behind his back, finally spoke. Ji Wu quickly bowed respectfully and said, "Thank you, Immortal Emperor, for your kindness." Ji Wu was very satisfied. However, Ji Wu didn't know how she was able to live under the foot of the Celestial Emperor's palace. She reflected on it day and night, feeling a little fearful. She didn't dare to stay here for long. After repeated consideration, Ji-woo decided to bid farewell to the immortal emperor and find another place to stay. Jin-tae slowly turned around, his half-closed eyes flashing with a bright light. He stared at Ji-woo for a while and said, "Since you're very satisfied, why look for another place to stay? This place was built for you. Just stay here." Ji-woo wanted to continue to decline, but Jin-tae's eyes flashed coldly. He stared at the thatched cottage on the side and asked, "Heir Shuejuan, did you build this thatched cottage?" As soon as this was said, Ji-woo could not say the words that were on the tip of her tongue. She was a little nervous, afraid that Jin-tae would attack Heir Shuejuan again. Heir Shuejuan cupped his fists expressionlessly and said, "Yes." His tone was stiff, without the slightest respect. Jin-tae stared at him coldly. There was no abnormality, but there was a terrifying invisible pressure that forced Heir Shuejuan to take a few steps back on the spot. In the blink of an eye, blood seeped out of the corner of Yi Shuejuan's mouth, but he still spoke in a stiff tone. "Immortal Emperor, what did I do wrong to provoke Immortal Emperor's anger?" His white teeth were dyed red with blood, and his body began to shake. Ji-woo was shocked. She stood between the two of them, under the invisible pressure. She bowed to Jin-tae and said, "Immortal Emperor, please calm down. Ji-woo asked Brother Yi to build this hut. It really has nothing to do with him. If Immortal Emperor wants to blame someone, please blame Ji-woo." The invisible terrifying pressure disappeared silently in an instant. Heir Shuejuan stabilized his body and bit his bloody lips without saying a word. Jin-tae's gaze fell on Ji-woo. "Since you pleaded for him, I will spare him once more. But Ji-woo, although I don't want to force you, my patience is limited. Think about it carefully. Within a month, I hope you can take the initiative to come to the Immortal Palace to find me. Don't let me come again." Ji-woo's face instantly turned pale. Jin-tae's so-called "that matter" was for her to agree to become his celestial empress. The time limit he gave this time was undoubtedly a final warning. At this moment, two people suddenly shouted outside the green wall. "Wu Xiong and De Mingluan are seeking an audience with Immortal Emperor." Jin-tae's eyes were slightly cold as he said, "Come in." Wu Xiong and De Mingluan's figures immediately appeared outside the door. They quickly walked to the pavilion and saluted together. "Greetings, Immortal Emperor." "What is it?" Jin-tae stared at the two and asked. The two looked at each other and knew that Jin-tae did not like to be long-winded. Wu Xiong stepped forward and took the lead to report, "I will be getting married soon. I especially came to ask for leave from Immortal Emperor. I hope Immortal Emperor will grant me this." "Grant it," Jin-tae said expressionlessly. "Commander Wu has worked hard and contributed greatly. On the day of your wedding, I will reward you handsomely." "Thank you, Immortal Emperor." Wu Xiong retreated. De Mingluan stepped forward at the right time and saluted. He told them about the fight between Yu Qianqiu and the others, and how he controlled 10,000 swords. When they heard this, Snow Lord and Ji-woo's eyes could not help but move. But they did not dare to change too much. They did not expect Yu Qianqiu to kill two late exalted immortal cultivators, as a soul formation cultivator. However, what shocked the two of them the most was that Yu Qianqiu was actually able to control 10,000 swords. The two of them naturally knew what this meant. It should be known that the two of them had personally fought against the Myriad Swords Demon Monarch back then. Jin-tae's fear of the Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords was not something that could be explained in a few words. Both of them knew that Yu Qianqiu was in big trouble this time. They could not help but quietly observe the changes in Jin-tae's expression. After this incident, I immediately suspected that Yu Qianqiu was related to the Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords, so I immediately found Yu Qianqiu to investigate in detail. In the end, I found that he had nothing to do with the Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords. It was only because he cultivated a sword technique that only looked impressive. Although he could control 10,000 swords, its power was ordinary. De Mingluan said as he presented a jade archive with both hands. "This is the sword technique of Guthyuan that Yu Qianqiu cultivated. I have also brought it with me. Please have a look, Immortal Emperor." When Jin-tae heard the name, Demon Lord of 10,000 Swords, his eyes immediately lit up, as if they were about to shoot out. He muttered, sword technique of Guiyuan? He opened his palm, and the jade archive immediately appeared in his hand. His eyes opened and closed, and the light in his eyes flickered. It was obvious that he was examining the contents inside. The people outside the pavilion held their breaths and waited quietly. After waiting for a long time, Jean Tai still did not make a move. They were shocked. This was the first time they had seen Jean Tai pay so much attention to an item. It was obvious that he was very wary of the demon lord of 10,000 swords, who had died many years ago. After a long time, Jean Tai snorted coldly. It looks like it, but it's not. It's just something that looks impressive. However, the person who wrote this sword technique is not simple. The art of soul splitting and manipulation is extraordinary. The person who wrote this seems to be deliberately hiding something. Now, I really suspect that this sword technique has something to do with the demon lord of 10,000 swords. When he said this, the 4 people below turned pale with fright. They thought, could it be that Yu Qianqiu was really related to the demon lord of 10,000 swords? This was a little too inconceivable. The countermeasure that Wu Xiong and Great Bright Wheel had previously discussed could not be said. Jean Tai swept a glance at the 4 people, thinking that they had been frightened by the demon lord of 10,000 swords. He snorted coldly and said, "Don't be afraid. I personally killed the demon lord of 10,000 swords. I saw his body and spirit destroyed with my own eyes. What's there to be afraid of about someone who can't be more dead?" His gaze turned to the dazed Great Bright Wheel, and he asked in a deep voice, "Since you suspect that he is related to the demon lord of 10,000 swords, why didn't you deal with it earlier? Do you really need me to teach you about this?" Great Bright Wheel didn't get the chance to explain. Wu Xiong took another step forward and answered first, reporting to the Immortal Emperor. "This matter is all my fault. I was the one who asked Great Bright Wheel to delay his actions." "This matter has something to do with you?" Jean Tai's eyes flashed with a cold light. Great Bright Wheel was anxious. He lowered his head and didn't say a word. He didn't know how Wu Xiong would deal with this. Wu Xiong hurriedly explained, "Because I accidentally came into contact with Yu Qianqiu during the meeting in the Divine Ruins realm. At that time, I learned from him that he had picked up a jade archive in the Divine Ruins realm, which recorded this Guiyuan sword technique. At that time, he wanted to flatter me and wanted to give this jade archive to me. At that time, I thought that it was something left behind by the disciples of the various sects in the Divine Ruins realm. I thought that the disciples sent out by the various sects were only at the demigod stage. What good things could they have left behind? I didn't take a fancy to it at that time, so I didn't take it from him. Instead, I accepted an immortal herb worth 60 billion divine grade spirit stones. I am guilty, and I am willing to accept the Immortal Emperor's punishment." Great Bright Wheel sighed slightly in his heart when he heard this. In order to protect his woman, this Wu Xiong actually didn't hesitate to make up lies and dirty lies. "Oh, I didn't think that the external affairs great commander of my immortal palace would also learn to accept bribes," Jean Tai said indifferently, then raised the jade archive in his hand. A strange light flashed in his eyes as he said, "In that case, this jade archive actually came from the Divine Ruins realm. Wu Xiong, are you sure you didn't make a mistake?" Chapter 896. This official can confirm that this Guiyuan sword art was picked up by Yu Qianqiu from the Divine Ruin realm. Wu Xiong replied respectfully. He was worried that there was something wrong with the jade archive in Jean Tai's hand. Hence he confirmed that the sword art came from the Divine Ruin realm, but did not mention that the jade archive came from the Divine Ruin realm. From the Divine Ruin realm? Jean Tai muttered under his breath as he looked at the jade archive in his hand. No one knew what he was thinking about, but he seemed to be confused. Everyone held their breath as they waited for a while. When Jean Tai regained his senses, he glared coldly at Wu Xiong. "A mere 60 billion divine grade spirit stones worth of immortal herbs can bribe the two of you to plead for mercy. It seems like even if this Yu Qianqiu has no connection with the 10,000 sword sect, his ability is not small. Although his tone was neither too fast nor too slow, the complexions of the Great Bright Wheel, and Wu Xiong changed. They knew that Jin Tai was already very unhappy about this matter. They were afraid that no one would be able to persuade him. Yu Qianqiu's little life was certainly going to be lost. Now they would have to see if Jin Tai wanted to escalate this matter. Both of them had already prepared themselves to take a step back. It was no longer important whether they could protect Yu Qianqiu at this critical moment. After all, Yu Qianqiu had nothing to do with them. The most important thing was to protect their own people. Ji Wu pursed her lips, hesitating for a moment before asking, Yu Qianqiu? The one who left those words on the waterfall, Yu Qianqiu? Everyone turned to look at Jin Tai at the same time. A trace of surprise flashed across Jin Tai's eyes as he asked, could it be that immortal monarch Ji Wu knows Yu Qianqiu? Immortal crocodile monarch looked at Ji Wu nervously, but Ji Wu took a step forward, replying respectfully, Ji Wu does not know this Yu Qianqiu. I only heard that this person left some words on the waterfall and created some very beautiful things that attracted people from the immortal world. She turned to look at the Great Bright Wheel. Great Bright Wheel is in charge of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance and has lived in the hallucinatory immortal city for a long time. I wonder if she's really as beautiful as the rumors say? De Mingluan was slightly startled. Then he cupped his fists and said, replying immortal monarch, it is true. This should be his way of doing business and attracting people. For this, he even specially built the tallest building in the celestial world, which is 23 stories high. It is indeed quite unique. Ji Wu faintly smiled and said, this Yu Qianqiu is also a wonderful person. He actually thought of such a method to attract people. If there's a chance, I'll have to pay a visit to his World Chamber of Commerce. If that World Chamber of Commerce is really as beautiful as the rumors say, I would like to invite them to help me design and build a beautiful residence in the future. De Mingluan and Wu Xiong looked at each other speechlessly. Then they quietly looked at Jin Tai. Jin Tai glanced coldly at the Crystal Palace, then looked at Ji Wu and asked, Immortal Lord Ji Wu, are you not satisfied with this residence? I wouldn't dare. Ji Wu bowed and said, the Celestial Emperor personally gave me a place to stay. Ji Wu is only grateful and doesn't dare to be dissatisfied. Although she spoke respectfully, everyone could hear that Ji Wu was clearly dissatisfied with this residence, but didn't dare to say it out of consideration for the Celestial Emperor's face. Jin Tai frowned and said, if you don't like it, then build one that you like. He then tilted his head and said, Wu Xiong, summon that Yu Qianqiu and tell him to build a satisfactory residence for immortal Lord Ji Wu. Tell him that if he does well, I will reward him. Wu Xiong was overjoyed. Since Jin Tai said this, it meant that he wouldn't pursue the matter of Yu Qianqiu anymore. Then all the danger was resolved. Wu Xiong was about to accept the order when Ji Wu shouted, wait! They looked over and saw Ji Wu bow and say, Ji Wu appreciates the Celestial Emperor's kindness. However, this Yu Qianqiu might be related to the demon monarch of myriad swords. How can Ji Wu do something that will make the Celestial Emperor unhappy, just because of my own small preferences? Great Bright Wheel and Wu Xiong were secretly overjoyed, but when they heard this, their hearts dropped again. Jin Tai paused and stared at Wu Xiong and Great Bright Wheel and said, you two have really investigated whether this Yu Qianqiu is related to myriad swords? Yes, we don't dare to lie. Great Bright Wheel and Wu Xiong replied in unison. The two of them had thrown caution to the wind this time. Although they said they didn't dare, in reality they were lying. Jin Tai nodded slightly and said, Ji Wu, since they have already investigated, it means that Yu Qianqiu indeed has nothing to do with Wang Jian. Recruiting him to build you a residence that you like can't be considered as abandoning the public for personal reasons. Moreover, a person who has been dead for a long time is not enough for us to go to war. These words were equivalent to confirming the matter. Great Bright Wheel and Wu Xiong immediately sighed in relief, knowing that the danger had passed. This, Ji Wu pondered for a moment and said, let's wait until I have the chance to go to the World Commerce Association to take a look. If it really is to my liking, it won't be too late to summon him. If it is not to my liking, why would I ask him to come? Jin Tai did not speak when he heard this. The reason why he put Ji Wu under house arrest here was to make Ji-woo agree to be his immortal empress without being forced. After all, no one wanted their wife to be forced, let alone the dignified immortal empress from the immortal world. He had just set a deadline of 1 month. After a month, if Ji-woo still did not agree, then he would use force. Therefore, he would not let Ji-woo go for at least this month, unless Ji-woo agreed in advance. Since you have made up your mind, then I won't force you. Let's wait until you see it in the future. Jin-tae pushed the boat with the current and said to Woo Seong and Great Bright Wheel, "If there is nothing else, go do your own things." After that, the golden glow flashed in the jadeite pavilion and disappeared. As soon as Jin-tae left, the invisible pressure that enveloped the entire courtyard disappeared. But at this moment, Yu Shuejun suddenly staggered and spat out a large mouthful of blood. Fresh blood sprayed onto the pillars of the jadeite pavilion and slid down bit by bit. It was a ghastly sight. "Brother Yu, what happened to you?" Ji-woo exclaimed and quickly supported him. "Of course it is Jin-tae's doing." Yu Shuejun gritted his teeth and waved his hand. "It's nothing. I have been holding it in. I feel better after spitting it out." He took out an immortal pill and swallowed it. Ji-woo looked at Great Bright Wheel and Woo Seong awkwardly. She did not know if they would report Yu Shuejun scolding Jin-tae in front of them. Great Bright Wheel and Woo Seong looked at each other, feeling a little emotional. Back then, one of the 12 great immortal monarchs was one of the top figures in the immortal world. Both of them had to be respectful when they saw him. Now, he had fallen into such a situation. The world was fickle, and fate was unpredictable. In fact, Ji-woo was thinking too much. The two were not fools. They both knew that Ji-woo and Yu Shuejun had a close relationship. If they reported Yu Shuejun to the immortal emperor, wouldn't they be looking for trouble in the future? Everyone knew that the weak could not win against the strong. Sooner or later, Ji-woo would become the immortal empress. If they offended the immortal empress, they would not want to live in the future. To put it bluntly, even if Ji-woo killed the two of them now, their deaths would be in vain. The immortal emperor would not do anything to Ji-woo. The two naturally pretended not to see or hear anything. They cupped their hands at Ji-woo and said, "Farewell, immortal monarch." Ji-woo held Yu Shuejun's arm with one hand and raised the other slightly, saying, "Goodbye." Great Bright Wheel and Woo Seong cupped their hands at Yu Shuejun again, then quickly turned and walked out, turning into two streams of light outside the courtyard. "Brother Yu, why do you have to do this?" Ji-woo held Yu Shuejun's arm and helped him into the pavilion. She set up a soundproof enchantment, shook her head and sighed. "You know it's not good to go against him. Why do you want to suffer? It's not that I want to criticize you, but you are too unwise." Yu Shuejun pushed her arm away, lifted his legs on the table in the pavilion, sat cross-legged and said, "I want to bear with it, but when I see him, I can't take it." He waved his hand and said, "Forget it, let's not talk about me. He just gave you a month's time limit. It seems that he has lost his patience. What are you going to do after a month?" Ji-woo shook her head and smiled bitterly. "What to do? What can I do? Who in the immortal realm disobeys his will? I'll take it one step at a time." Yu Shuejun raised his hand and wiped the blood on his mouth. He looked at the bright red in his palm and frowned. "Actually, I have two immature ideas, but the two of us are trapped here. It's very difficult to implement them." Ji-woo's eyes lit up and said, "Brother Yu, why don't you tell me?" Yu Shuejun thought for a while and shook his head slowly. "It's just a flash of inspiration. It's almost impossible to implement." "Say it," Ji-woo said with a pleading tone. "Tell me, let me hear it." Yu Shuejun put his hands on his knees, paused and said, "Last time, when Silver Armor 1,000 soldiers sent us back to the immortal realm in the underworld, he said that if you need any help, you can look for him. He will do his best. 1,000 soldiers is the emperor of the underworld's most trusted person. If you can send someone to contact 1,000 soldiers and ask the emperor of the underworld to look for the immortal emperor, you may have a chance because of the emperor of the underworld." "The emperor of the underworld will look for the immortal emperor for me?" Ji-woo was stunned for a while, and then smiled bitterly. "This is impossible. Even if 1,000 soldiers can really ask the emperor of the underworld for help, the immortal emperor, and the emperor of the underworld have never been on good terms. Not to mention this kind of thing, the emperor of the underworld will not give in. Moreover, who can contact 1,000 soldiers? 1,000 soldiers lives high in the emperor of the underworld. Even if an ordinary person goes to the underworld, I'm afraid it will be difficult to see him. Moreover, we are under house arrest here, and there is no way to contact suitable and reliable people to go to the underworld. If this method doesn't work, what's the other way? I said I just thought of it by chance. It's not feasible. As for the second method, it's even more impossible. Yu Shuijun smiled. At this time, there was no psychological burden. He said casually, "At present, apart from the emperor of the underworld, there is another person who may help you. That person is Yu Qianqiu's master Bai Changchun. Although Bai Changchun was defeated by the emperor of the underworld, with his ability to fight against 4 underworld generals alone, I dare say that in the immortal realm and the emperor of the underworld, no one is his match." The most terrifying thing about this person is that no matter what kind of expert he meets, he gets stronger the more he fights. I have seen this person's ability. I am afraid he will not die so easily. Maybe his cultivation is even stronger now. Chapter 897. Ji Wu's expression froze. She had fought with Bai Changchun twice. When it came to Bai Changchun's ability, she knew it better than Yi Shuijun. He was an extraordinary existence, and the more he fought, the stronger he became. She clearly remembered that when they first fought, Bai Changchun was still no match for her and Yi Xiao. But when he appeared again not long after, that terrifying scene was still fresh in her memory. Yi Shuijun saw that she was silent and lowered his voice. "If Bai Changchun is not dead, I believe that he is the one who is qualified to fight against Kentaichi. Because I don't think Jintai is necessarily the opponent of Emperor of the Underworld. Since Bai Changchun can fight with Emperor of the Underworld, he can naturally fight with Jintai. If Yu Qianqiu can contact him and ask him to deal with Jintai, even if he is not Jintai's opponent, at least he can make Jintai forget about you for a short time. If he can kill Jintai, it will be better." But he was seriously injured by Emperor of the Underworld and fled into the boundless dark land. Now I don't know if he is dead or alive. Even if he is still alive, can Yu Qianqiu find him? Even if he can find him, why would Yu Qianqiu let his master take such a big risk? Brother Yi, think about it. If Bai Changchun comes here to challenge Jintai, Emperor of the Underworld will come to take revenge. At that time, Bai Changchun will not only face Jintai. Ji Wu bitterly smiled and said, "Besides, it's not good to tell him this through someone else. We're under house arrest here, so there's no way for us to meet him. If someone else told him this, do you think he would believe it? Most importantly, he doesn't need to help me like this. I said it is an immature method. If you say that he doesn't need to help, then you are overthinking. You have saved his life just now. Shouldn't he be grateful?" Ji Wu shook her head and said, "But he saved me before. If he didn't save me before, I don't need to save him this time. An eye for an eye. No one owes anyone anything, so we cancel each other out. It's a pity that you and I don't have a chance to go to the illusory immortal city. Otherwise, I would have to ask him to contact his master," Snow Lord replied casually. But in his heart, he was thinking that if he could really meet Yu Qianqiu, he could ask Yu Qianqiu for help. If Yu Qianqiu dared to refuse, he could threaten him with the fact that he touched Ji Wu's butt. Yu Qianqiu had to consider whether Jintai would skin him alive if he touched Jintai's wife's butt. As soon as the 2 streaks of light flew out of the Paradise Immortal Realms mountain range, they immediately slowed down. Wu Xiong and De Mingluan looked at each other with lingering fear in their hearts. Even now, they still didn't dare to believe that they had passed the test just like that. "Our luck is good. I didn't expect Dancing Ji Immortal Monarch to stand up for me at such a critical moment." Wu Xiong shook his head in disbelief. "Luck, I'm so lucky. If it wasn't for Immortal Lord Wu Ji, I really can't think of anyone else in the immortal world who could change the Immortal Emperor's attitude. It's not just our luck, it's also Yu Qianqiu's luck. I didn't expect those strange things he came up with to save his life at such a critical moment. It's not just good luck, it's simply good fate. De Mingluan recalled the incident and could not help but sigh. It's good that the crisis is over. Wu Xiong cupped his hands as he flew and said, Brother Mingluan, I still have some matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave now. De Mingluan also cupped his hands in farewell, and the two immediately sped up in two different directions. The two of them sighed, but they didn't know that Ji Wu's words were not because of their or Yu Qianqiu's good luck. Other than Shuejun, no one knew that Yu Qianqiu and Ji Wu had known each other for a long time. Because of this relationship, it was the key to surviving this crisis. But then again, if Bai Changchun hadn't shown mercy to Ji Wu in the Holy East Land, then Ji Wu wouldn't have helped him today. But if Ji Wu had been killed by Bai Changchun, Shuejun would not have been able to return to the celestial realm with Ji Wu. If Shuejun did not return to the celestial realm with the small silver ball that Yu Qianqiu gave him, then Yu Qianqiu would still be in the human world as Duge Qiubai, and would not come to the celestial realm. Therefore, some things were predestined, and they could only develop step by step. The World Chamber of Commerce's business had begun to get on the right track, and hundreds of feudal lords were gradually getting into the swing of things. After careful consideration, Yu Qianqiu understood that his first plan in the celestial realm had succeeded. With the World Chamber of Commerce as a pretense for doing business, the next step could be justifiably to cooperate with Skyward Palace. As long as he obtained the various immortal pills he needed, it would not take long for a large number of immortal realm experts to appear in his hands. Just think about it. If the feudal lords, the army of Utopia, and the hundreds of thousands of cultivators in the human world all reached the immortal realm, it would be a terrifying thing. The more experts there were, the stronger he would be, and many things would be easier to do. As long as the overall strength of the World Chamber of Commerce increased, his next step would be to find a way to enter the netherworld. He could not let Bai Changchun's life and death be unknown. Until now, he still tried to contact Bai Changchun every day, but there was no news. This made him very anxious, but he understood that some things were useless to be anxious. He could only take it step by step. However, if he wanted to walk in the netherworld, he would not be able to do so without enough manpower and strength. Now that he knew a lot, the netherworld was too vast, many times larger than the celestial realm. There was also the endless land of darkness, which few people set foot in. For this reason, Yu Qianqiu had already thought about it. As long as he could find out whether Bai Changchun was dead or alive, he would not hesitate to throw hundreds of thousands of immortal realm cultivators into the netherworld. I don't care how vast the netherworld is. As long as there are ghosts, there will be my people. I don't believe that I can't find any clues. This was what Yu Qianqiu thought. For this day to come, Yu Qianqiu could be said to have put in a lot of effort. However, things were somewhat unpredictable. He had arranged for Shui Mingqing to contact Skyward Palace about purchasing immortal pills, but who knew that there would be no news at all? For this reason, Yu Qianqiu even personally went to Skyward Palace's branch. In the end, the disciples of Skyward Palace's branch told him that the elders in charge had left to attend to something. Yu Qianqiu immediately felt that it was strange. Shui Mingqing was too heartless. He did not even think of a way to send a message before leaving. So he tried to find Du Feng, Hu Yunlong and the others. In the end, the answers he got were similar. This made him suspect that these people were deliberately hiding from him. It was not until he met Wan Ling, who took the initiative to visit him and build a good relationship with him, that his guess was confirmed from her mouth. This group of people was indeed deliberately hiding from him. After asking for the reason, Yu Qianqiu was suddenly speechless. It turned out that these people were also frightened by the scene of him controlling the 10,000 swords. They all suspected that he was related to the 10,000 swords Demon King. They were afraid that when the Immortal Palace took action, they would implicate him. So they deliberately distanced themselves from him. In fact, Yu Qianqiu himself did not pay much attention to this matter in the beginning. After all, he had already passed this hurdle in front of the Great Bright Wheel. But now that this group of people had messed with him, he also became nervous. Thinking about it, it made sense. The Great Bright Wheel was the Great Bright Wheel. It definitely did not represent the attitude of immortal Emperor Jin Tai. The latter was the master who held the power of life and death. On the rooftop of the World Commerce Association, there was a long rattan chair that could seat 3 people. However, there was only a man and a woman sitting side by side in the sun, looking a bit like a couple. Yu Qianqiu was worried, but on the surface he lazily said, "Thank you for telling me this, but they are all afraid of being implicated by me. Are you not afraid?" Wan Ling tilted her head to look at him and chuckled. "Others may not know your background, but do you think I don't know? Do you think I need to be afraid?" Yu Qianqiu was startled. Think about it. The other party thought of him as a trusted secret agent of the immortal emperor. Why would he be afraid? Speechless, he tilted his head to look at the smiling Wan Ling. She was quite pretty. No matter how he looked at her, she did not look like such a pervert. He couldn't help but ask, "Wan Ling, I heard that you like to steal other people's husbands. Is that true?" Wan Ling's smile abruptly stopped. Her expression slightly darkened. If someone else said this in front of her, she would have already exploded. However, the person in front of her was Yu Qianqiu. At this moment, a figure suddenly appeared in front of the two of them. The newcomer was wearing a golden robe and was thin. Who else could it be but De Mingluan? The two of them quickly stood up and bowed. De Mingluan seemed to be a bit surprised that Wan Ling would be alone with Yu Qianqiu. He then directly asked Yu Qianqiu, "Where is Wu Xiong's wife?" "Oh, she left early in the morning." Yu Qianqiu was a bit apprehensive as he asked, "Why did executive come here?" De Mingluan looked at Wan Ling and didn't say anything. It seemed that it was not very convenient with an outsider around. Yu Qianqiu understood and immediately smiled at Wan Ling. "I have some things to do here, so I won't keep you for long. Come and play often when you have time." Wan Ling nodded and bowed to De Mingluan before flying away from the rooftop. Before she left, she couldn't help but look deeply at the two of them. From the way the two of them talked, she could tell that the relationship between the two of them was not ordinary, especially when the two of them looked like they wanted to whisper something. Why was there a need for the dignified executive of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance to be like this with a small World Commerce Chamber sect leader? From this, Wan Ling was even more certain that Yu Qianqiu was a secret agent of the immortal emperor. At the same time, she was even more certain that nothing would happen to Yu Qianqiu. De Mingluan looked around the rooftop and asked, "Where is Wei Chuanqiu and Yin Peng?" Yu Qianqiu shook his head and sighed. "AI, don't mention Wei Chuanqiu anymore. I don't know what happened to him, but he seemed to have lost his soul these 2 days. He was crying and talking about his already dead daughter Xiao Yuer." De Mingluan immediately knew what was going on. He had personally given that bat jade pendant to Wei Chuanqiu, so he had already expected it. He immediately frowned and said, "Where are they? Bring me to find them." "Please follow me." Yu Qianqiu led De Mingluan down the rooftop. After entering the interior of the 22nd floor, De Mingluan was also attracted by the clean, bright, and simple style. He couldn't help but look around a few more times. The two of them came to a large door at the end of the corridor. Yu Qianqiu pushed open the door and pointed inside. Chapter 898. This was a large room. There were 2 rooms on the top floor. There were no furnishings inside, only a few rattan chairs. The room was very quiet. Yin Peng silently stood by the window and looked outside. Wei Chuanqiu had finally stopped crying. He was paralyzed on a rattan chair with a dazed expression. The door was pushed open, causing Yin Peng to turn his head. Wei Chuanqiu was still lying there unmoved. Seeing the two walk in, Yin Peng stared at the Great Bright Wheel and said lightly, "You shouldn't have given him this jade pendant." The Great Bright Wheel looked at Wei Chuanqiu, who was holding the bat pendant in a daze, and said disapprovingly, "Let him be like this. It'll be fine once the sadness passes." "How did it go?" Yin Peng's gaze turned to Yu Qianqiu and said, "What does immortal Emperor Jin Tai plan to do to him?" Yu Qianqiu's heart clenched when he heard this. This was also the result he wanted to know. Perhaps she was stimulated by the words immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Wei Chuanqiu, who was paralyzed on the rattan chair, made a goo-goo sound in her throat. Her pair of lifeless eyes that were immersed in the past gradually became lively. The three looked at him at the same time. Wei Chuanxiu looked at the great bright wheel, then stared at the bat pendant in his hand for a while, and then carefully put it away. "You're back from the Immortal Palace?" Wei Chuanxiu struggled to stand, as if he had just recovered from a serious illness. The others saw that he was speaking normally again, and didn't say anything. They didn't want to bring up his sad past again. The great bright wheel nodded slightly and said, "This time it was a fluke. At least it passed unscathed. The immortal emperor has already made his stance clear. He won't pursue this matter anymore." Yu Qianqiu's tense nerves immediately relaxed. He smiled at the three people who were looking at him in a simple and honest manner. Wei Chuanxiu tilted his head to look at the great bright wheel and said, "When did Jin Tai become so easy to talk to? You must have put in a lot of effort. Otherwise, with Jin Tai Ning's habit of not letting the wrong person go, this guy would probably be in trouble." "I did put in some effort, but it was useless." De Mingluan stared at Yu Qianqiu and said, "Actually, the one who played the decisive role was someone else. This brat's fortune was really good." At the crucial moment, Immortal Monarch Ji Wu suddenly spoke up for him. This was why the Immortal Emperor changed his mind. It was so close. "Immortal Monarch Dancing Ji?" The three of them exclaimed in unison. Wei Chuanxiu asked curiously, "Why would Immortal Monarch Wu Ji speak up for him?" De Mingluan immediately explained what had happened. Only then did the few of them understand what had happened. Wei Chuanxiu immediately clicked his tongue and said, "It seems that you are really lucky. The words on the waterfall and this tall building actually saved your life." Yu Qianqiu had already informed him in advance. He did not want to say anything more. He strode out of the room, leaving Wei Chuanxiu alone in the room in a daze. The entire 22nd floor was under Yu Qianqiu's sole control. Of course, if Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng wanted a room on this floor, he would not say anything. Yu Qianqiu, who had returned to his room, was very conflicted. There was no other reason than that he had not visited Furong, Wu Lixue, and the others for a long time. He had wanted to take this opportunity to go and comfort them one by one. However, now that he had met them, it would be inexcusable if he did not accompany them. After meeting them, going to bed, chatting, and then immediately leaving? He really could not stand the grief in their eyes when they parted. However, world commerce had only been established not long ago. Trouble could come knocking at their door at any time. He could not abandon world commerce to accompany women all day, hugging a beauty in one hand, and wielding a sword to conquer the world with the other was a good idea. He had heard of such a cool thing. But who would dare to do such a thing? They would definitely die a quick death. Moreover, he was still carefully working hard. How could he have the qualifications to act cool? He could only make them wait. He would bring them back after he had established himself. Yu Qianqiu comforted himself and disappeared from his room. When he reappeared, he had already returned to Bai Suzhen's room, an ethereal palace in Utopia. However, he realized that Bai Suzhen was not in the room. He closed his eyes and used his divine sense to search the entire Utopia. At that moment, Bai Suzhen was in the immortal herb plantation. As Yu Qianqiu had instructed her and Chu Ping, to keep an eye on the immortal herb plantation, she had spent most of her time here recently. Bai Suzhen, who was walking in the immortal herb garden to check on the growth of the immortal herbs, suddenly stopped. Yu Qianqiu's voice rang in her ears, asking her to return to her room. A peaceful smile appeared on Bai Suzhen's face. In a flash, she flew towards Ethereal Palace. As Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was no longer what it used to be, the entire area of Utopia had become very wide. Mountains and rivers had appeared one after another. Because of this, the purple chaos was getting further and further away from Ethereal Palace. In order to make better use of the purple chaos to plant immortal herbs, the immortal herb garden was set far away from Ethereal Palace. After half a day, Bai Suzhen returned to her room. As soon as she entered the room, she saw Yu Qianqiu lying on her couch and looking at her with a smile. A gentle smile appeared on Bai Suzhen's face. She walked to the couch and sat down. She looked at him and asked, "You've been waiting for a long time, right?" Actually, Yu Qianqiu didn't wait for long. Seeing that Bai Sujin wouldn't be back for a while, he was afraid that something would happen during this half a day. Thus, he returned to the World Commerce Association to oversee things. He only silently watched Bai Sujin fly back. When Bai Sujin was about to arrive, he returned to her room. Yu Qianqiu didn't reply to her. He changed his position on the couch and rested his head on Bai Sujin's thigh. Bai Sujin also adjusted her position and tried to make him as comfortable as possible. She stroked his hair and asked, "Did you summon me back for something?" Smelling Bai Sujin's body fragrance, Yu Qianqiu, who was calming and relaxing, couldn't help but smile wryly when he heard this. When can I always lie down like this and not care about anything? Then, I can have my clothes stretched out and food served. And there's even a beautiful woman to accompany me. As he spoke, he reached out and stroked Bai Sujin's tranquil and smiling face. "I'm sorry. This time, I might have to break your peaceful life." Bai Sujin grabbed his hand that was stroking her face and looked down at Yu Qianqiu, who was lying on her lap. She smiled faintly and said, "As long as you are well, this is my peaceful life. Do you need me to do anything? I know you don't have any interest in cultivation anymore, but I found you a master without your consent. I hope you won't be angry." Yu Qianqiu looked into Bai Sujin's eyes and said, "If you really don't want to, then forget it." He had already decided that if Bai Sujin didn't want to, he definitely wouldn't force her. When the time comes, he would consider letting Lady Mu go. "You found me a master?" Bai Sujin was startled. Yu Qianqiu immediately climbed up and explained excitedly, "I found him from the immortal realm. Your master is not ordinary." He explained how he met Wei Chuanxiu and emphasized the origin of the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra in Wei Chuanxiu's hands. He told her that he hoped she could cultivate the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra. Hearing this, Bai Sujin was very surprised. She didn't expect there to be such a powerful person like the ancestor of 10,000 demons, Tai Shu Zheng, in the demon race. Imagine how powerful the cultivation treasure left behind by a person who could be compared to the devil god would be. However, she was only surprised. Bai Sujin didn't seem to have much interest in this. She frowned and thought for a while, then slowly nodded and said, "I'm willing. I hope I can help you after I've cultivated it." Chapter 899. Yes, yes, yes. When you have successfully cultivated the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra, you will be of great help to me. Yu Qianqiu nodded repeatedly and reached out to pull her, saying, "Come with me." Actually, to him, whether or not he wanted Bai Sujin's help was another matter. The key was that he hoped that Bai Sujin's own cultivation would be higher and stronger. The affairs of the world were unpredictable, and no one knew what would happen in the future. If she encountered any danger, she would be able to protect herself. Secondly, it was too worrying to let someone else cultivate a treasure, like the Myriad Demon Heart Sutra. If Bai Sujin cultivated it, he would be at ease and feel that it was no different from cultivating it himself. Bai Sujin smiled knowingly at his words, and did not point it out. She reached out her hand, and let Yu Qianqiu hold it. The two of them disappeared together. When they reappeared, a spacious, bright, and unique room made Bai Sujin's eyes flicker endlessly. The room was a suite of rooms with clean white jade floors. There were a few wrought tan chairs in the living room. It was spacious and bright, and other than that, there were no other furnishings. Bai Sujin looked at Yu Qianqiu with a puzzled expression. Yu Qianqiu immediately smiled and explained, "This is the World Commerce Association. This room is the room I live in. There are no furnishings in the room. It's too simple." Bai Sujin let go of his hand and walked to the side of a few wrought tan chairs to feel around. Then, she pushed open the doors of a few small rooms and looked inside. She found that it was empty. Indeed, there was nothing prepared. Finally, she walked to the window of the living room and looked out at the tens of thousands of mountains. The mountaintops were occupied by houses, and there were continuous streams of light rising and falling in the sky. For a moment, she was a little absent-minded. She murmured as if she was talking in a dream, "Is this the legendary immortal realm?" Yu Qianqiu walked behind her, hugged her waist and whispered in her ear, "You're not mistaken, this is the celestial realm." Bai Sujin tilted her head slightly and leaned on his shoulder. Time flies. I still remember that you were still a dispirited little disciple of Ong Kwang Sung in that cave. I didn't expect you to have gone so far. You brought me out of that cave all those years ago, and now you've brought me to the immortal world. All of this feels like a dream. This is not a dream. This is reality. Yu Qianqiu buried his head in that fair neck and deeply inhaled the fragrance. He said with satisfaction, "In order to let the people I love have better and more beautiful dreams, I have always been working hard." Bai Suzhen's eyes were a little blurred. She didn't say a word, and just quietly leaned on Yu Qianqiu's shoulder, looking out of the window peacefully. The two of them leaned on each other for a long time. Then, Yu Qianqiu reluctantly broke the silence and said, "Let's go. I'll take you to see your future master." "Okay." Bai Suzhen turned around with a peaceful face. Yu Qianqiu took her hand and led her outside. When they arrived at the door of Wei Chuanqiu's room, Yu Qianqiu pushed it open and found that Wei Chuanqiu wasn't there. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head and thought that the old guy couldn't have run away, right? He was a little worried as he pulled Bai Suzhen towards the rooftop. Bai Suzhen quietly followed him from start to finish. She was calm in this strange place. Wherever he pulled her, her white dress fluttered in the wind. She followed him, trusting him unreservedly. When the two of them reached the rooftop, Yu Qianqiu immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Wei Chuanqiu didn't run away. He was standing side by side with Yin Peng in front of the white jade railing. Yu Qianqiu pointed at Wei Chuanqiu's thin back and said, "He is the green-winged Bat King Wei Chuanqiu. He is also the master I found for you. That is the White Cloud Mountain Lord Yin Peng, who is equally famous as the Bat King Wei Chuanqiu." The sound of Yu Qianqiu's words attracted Yin Peng's attention. Yin Peng turned around and looked at Bai Suzhen. Yin Peng, who had always been cold and indifferent, looked like he had seen a ghost. He slowly turned around and stared at Bai Suzhen dumbfounded. Wei Chuanqiu, who was beside him, didn't move at all. His face was full of anger. He held the white jade railing with both hands and muttered, "This brat isn't a good thing. He always wants to take advantage of me. Did he bring someone with him?" Yin Peng's Adam's apple moved up and down as he swallowed with difficulty. He slowly patted Wei Chuanqiu's shoulder and said, "Take a look." Wei Chuanqiu shook off his hand and scolded, "I already said that this brat isn't a good thing. I don't need to look to know that he brought me a disciple. You have to take a look. I think I'm seeing things." This time, Yin Peng didn't pat him, but forcefully turned him around. Wei Chuanqiu glanced at him in annoyance. But this glance made Wei Chuanqiu feel as if he had been struck by lightning. He felt as if electricity was running through his body, and his heart was beating wildly. He was completely stunned on the spot. His small eyes were wide open, and his mouth was dry. His breathing became heavier and heavier. What were these two old fellows doing? Even if they had never seen a beauty before, there was no need to put on such a lecherous look. Yu Qianqiu looked at the two of them suspiciously. After standing in front of them, the two of them continued to stare at Bai Suzhen without blinking. Even though Bai Suzhen was calm and tranquil, she felt numb from the two people's gazes. She couldn't help but look at Yu Qianqiu. Seeing that Yu Qianqiu didn't say anything, she let go of Yu Qianqiu's hand. A gust of wind blew and Bai Suzhen, dressed in white, bowed and said, "Bai Suzhen greets the two seniors." "Bai Suzhen?" Yin Peng muttered and looked at Yu Qianqiu, who knew that Wei Chuanqiu, who was at the side, turned a deaf ear to Bai Suzhen. As if having an epileptic seizure, he made a hugging gesture with both hands and walked shakily towards Bai Suzhen. His face was filled with surprise and joy. He panted and said, Xiao Yu'er, is that you? Is it really you? Father thought you. Why have you been hiding from Father? I know you're angry at Father. It's all Father's fault. I shouldn't have left you two mother and daughter alone." Bai Suzhen was confused by him. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with a puzzled expression, as if asking, "Is this the master you found for me?" Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows and narrowed his eyes. He stared at Wei Chuanqiu, who was walking over shakily, to see what he was up to. However, Wei Chuanqiu's next action immediately made him angry. He saw Wei Chuanqiu's pair of experienced hands actually hug Bai Suzhen's fair and clean face. It was really intolerable. "You your mother?" Yu Qianqiu was furious. He suddenly flared up and kicked Wei Chuanqiu's face. Ah! Wei Chuanqiu screamed and fell to the ground. Before he could react to what was going on, he saw Yu Qianqiu pouncing on him. He pinned him to the ground and gave him a crazy beating. Wei Chuanqiu cried out in pain. Old shameless thing. You actually dare to play this trick. You dare to take liberties with my woman in front of me. Yu Qianqiu flew into a rage. He punched and kicked Wei Chuanqiu, who was on the ground. Bai Suzhen was stunned. Yin Peng was also stunned. No one expected this scene to happen. When Yin Peng reacted and wanted to help, he only heard Yu Qianqiu scream in pain. He flew out with a shadow. Wei Chuanqiu jumped up and pointed at Yu Qianqiu, who was rolling on the ground a dozen meters away. He shouted angrily, "You brat, do you want to die? You dare to hit Grandpa again? You don't want to live anymore." From the looks of it, he was beaten awake by Yu Qianqiu. A white shadow flashed, and Bai Suzhen had already flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side. She supported Yu Qianqiu, who was crawling up, and asked anxiously, "Are you okay?" Yu Qianqiu also had a footprint on his face. He was shaking his head and seemed to be a little dizzy. "Xiao Yu'er, do you hate Daddy so much that you would rather help him than Daddy?" Wei Chuanqiu looked at Bai Suzhen, who was supporting Yu Qianqiu, and said bitterly. Tears were already welling up in her eyes. Her emotions were fluctuating a little. Old B****, I'm going to kill you. Yu Qianqiu shook his dizzy head and shouted randomly. He couldn't even tell which direction he was going in. "Both of you shut up." Yin Peng shouted coldly and flashed to the middle of the two enemies. He first waved his hand and laid a soundproof enchantment on the rooftop. Then he looked at both sides and stared at Wei Chuanqiu and said, "Wei Chuanqiu, stop fooling around. Wake up. This person isn't Xiao Yu'er. Xiao Yu'er is already dead." "Nonsense. Xiao Yu'er is clearly standing here." Wei Chuanqiu shouted himself hoarse. Fortunately, Yin Peng had the foresight to lay a soundproof enchantment on the rooftop first. Otherwise, his shout would definitely attract a lot of people to watch the show. Yu Qianqiu, who had woken up from shaking his head, immediately pointed at Wei Chuanqiu and scolded. "Old lunatic, are you done with acting like a hooligan? Do you think I'm afraid of you? I was a hooligan leader in my previous life, and I specialized in dealing with hooligans." To him, anything could be discussed. However, if someone dared to touch Bai Suzhen, then there was absolutely no room for discussion. Yu Qianqiu, shut up. After Yin Peng shouted, he immediately cupped his fists at Bai Suzhen and said, "Miss Bai, right? Please forgive me. This old friend of mine thought that you were his daughter, who had passed away many years ago. He didn't mean anything else, because you look too much like his daughter. Even I thought that I was hallucinating when I saw you. He didn't choose the wrong person to explain to." At this moment, Wei Chuanqiu and Yu Qianqiu were a little crazy. His explanation was very unpleasant to listen to. When Bai Suzhen heard what he said, and combined it with their reaction when they saw her, she immediately understood and nodded. "Yu Qianqiu, don't be impulsive. It's a misunderstanding." Bai Suzhen held back the furious Yu Qianqiu and shouted. Her words were more effective than anyone else's. Yu Qianqiu, who was rolling up his sleeves and kicking and scolding, immediately stopped. Bai Suzhen immediately seized the opportunity to explain with Yin Peng's words. "You look very much like his dead daughter." Yu Qianqiu gradually calmed down. He wiped his faintly aching face and turned to Yin Peng and said, "Senior Yin, are you sure you didn't see wrongly?" Yin Peng blocked Wei Chuanqiu and shook his head. "How could I see wrongly? Very similar, simply too similar. It's as if they were carved from the same mold. The only difference is that their temperaments are as different as the clouds and mud. Xiao Yu'er is smart and eccentric, while she is graceful and quiet." "No, she is Xiao Yu'er," Wei Chuanqiu shouted crazily, and tried to break free from Yin Peng's obstruction. A cold light flashed in Yin Peng's eyes. His 5 fingers formed into eagle claws and faintly glowed with a golden light. He streaked across like lightning and directly grabbed Wei Chuanqiu's collarbone. He shouted coldly, "Open your eyes and look clearly. Look at this lady's original form. Is she your Xiao Yu'er?" Chapter 900. Under Yin Peng's coercion, a layer of green light appeared in Wei Chuanqiu's eyes. When he saw Bai Suzhen's true form, he was dumbfounded. He murmured, "White fox. How could this be? How could this be? She's not Xiao Yuer at all. She only looks like her." Yinpeng pulled Wei Chuanxiu's arm. "Looks like." Wei Chuanxiu looked at Bai Suzhen in a daze. He was stunned on the spot. Yu Qianqiu knew that he couldn't talk to him for a while. He could only wait for him to wake up. He pulled Bai Suzhen and said, "There's something wrong with this guy's brain. Let's go." Before Bai Suzhen was pulled away, she looked back at Wei Chuanxiu with pity. After the two returned to the room, Yu Qianqiu leaned back on the rattan chair. He didn't expect something like this to happen. Bai Suzhen shook her head with a faint smile. She took out a white handkerchief and wiped the footprint on his face. With this warmth, Yu Qianqiu's mood improved a lot. He pulled Bai Suzhen to sit with him, and told Bai Suzhen everything he knew about the immortal world. No matter how surprising and dangerous Yu Qianqiu's story was, Bai Suzhen always had a faint smile on her face. She listened carefully, and would occasionally ask a question. Unknowingly, Yu Qianqiu lied on Bai Suzhen's lap again. He didn't know when, but Yu Qianqiu fell asleep as he talked. On the long rattan chair in the living room, Bai Suzhen, dressed in white, sat there quietly. She hugged her head on her lap. This quiet scene was suddenly broken by a knock on the door. Yu Qianqiu suddenly sat up and shouted, "Who is it? Come in." The door was pushed open, and Wei Chuanqiu carefully poked her head out. She smiled and nodded at the two of them. Yu Qianqiu immediately rolled his eyes and shouted, "You shameless old thing. You even attacked me just now. I don't want to see you scram." Wei Chuanqiu nodded and bowed, smiling apologetically. "It's a misunderstanding, a misunderstanding. Don't take it to heart." As he spoke, he closed the door and walked over with a smug face. His eyes kept sneaking glances at Bai Suzhen's face. Wei Chuanqiu casually cast a soundproof enchantment in the room, then dragged a rattan chair, and sat across the two of them. She nervously asked Bai Suzhen, "Miss, may I know where is this immortal land?" "What?" Yu Qianqiu glared at him and said, "She's my woman. What does it have to do with you where she is? Are you up to no good?" No. Wei Chuanqiu waved her hand and said, "It's just that she looks too much like my late daughter." As she spoke, she checked Bai Suzhen's cultivation, and found that she was only at the end of the tribulation stage. She then asked Yu Qianqiu, "That she's the disciple you found for me?" Yu Qianqiu looked at the old man from head to toe and snorted coldly. "Originally, but I think there's something wrong with your character. I really don't feel at ease letting her be your disciple. Just pretend I didn't say anything about this. Don't mention it again in the future. I'll let her go back tomorrow." Bai Suzhen looked at him in surprise. "Ah, go back." Wei Chuanqiu suddenly stood up and pointed at Yu Qianqiu anxiously. You. How can you go back on your words? How can you go back on what you said?" Yu Qianqiu was happy in his heart. He also stood up and walked around Wei Chuanqiu twice. He said strangely, "You didn't agree at first. Isn't what I'm doing now exactly what you want? Bat King Wei, tell me honestly, what do you want?" Just as Wei Chuanqiu was about to explain, he was taken aback. He took 2 steps back, and looked at Yu Qianqiu. Suddenly he chuckled and said, "Don't give me that. You know what you're thinking. You just want to take this opportunity to threaten me, and force me to teach you the Heart Sutra." As he spoke, he looked back at Bai Suzhen and said, "That's not a problem. I can promise you, but you have to promise me one thing." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He had indeed seen through Wei Chuanqiu's weakness. He wanted to use this opportunity to force Wei Chuanqiu to teach Bai Suzhen the entire 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra. This was because their previous agreement was that Wei Chuanqiu's cultivation technique would allow Bai Suzhen to protect herself against experts below the Immortal Emperor stage. Who would have thought that Wei Chuanqiu was also an old fox? He saw through the other party's scheme in an instant. "Do you think everyone is as despicable and shameless as you?" Yu Qianqiu said with a face full of disdain. Wei Chuanqiu laughed coldly. No matter what he said, he continued, "As long as you agree to my condition, I will do my best to teach you the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra. If you don't agree, then forget it. But I warn you, this is your last chance. If you reject it, there will not be a second chance." Yu Qianqiu was stunned. The corner of his mouth twitched. He gritted his teeth and said, "Old bat, you win. But I also warn you, I will not agree to conditions that are too excessive." "Speak. What condition?" Wei Chuanxiu became slightly agitated when he heard that. He did his best to suppress his rising and falling chest. He looked at Bai Suzhen and said word by word, "As long as you agree to be my daughter, I can make you the #1 expert of the demon race." Bai Suzhen's red lips parted slightly. She was stunned. Yu Qianqiu was also speechless. He did not expect Wei Chuanxiu to make such a request. The room immediately became quiet. Wei Chuanxiu said anxiously, "Why? Can't you agree?" Bai Suzhen was at a loss. She looked at Yu Qianqiu for help. Yu Qianqiu scratched his head helplessly. This request could be said to be excessive, but it could also be said to be not excessive. It all depended on what the person involved thought. He coughed awkwardly and said, "Bat King Wei, I understand your feelings, but this kind of thing cannot be forced." He turned to look at Bai Suzhen and said, "You decide for yourself. Don't force it. We have not reached the point where we have to sell our bodies for glory." Bai Suzhen furrowed her brows. Becoming someone else's daughter? This decision was simply too difficult for her. The most important thing was that the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra had no attraction to her at all. To become someone else's daughter for something that had no attraction at all. No one was willing to do it. However, what made her hesitant was that Yu Qianqiu clearly hoped that she would cultivate the Myriad Goblin Heart Sutra. After she cultivated the Myriad Goblin Heart Sutra, she would definitely be of help to Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu could tell that Bai Suzhen was unwilling. He immediately said without hesitation, "Bat King Wei, let's drop this matter. Don't mention it again. You can keep the Myriad Goblin Heart Sutra and slowly cultivate it. She is she and you are you. How can your opinion represent hers?" Wei Chuanqiu roared. Then he strode in front of Bai Suzhen and squeezed out a smile. "Don't worry. All I want is a status. In the future, you and I can just call each other father and daughter. I don't really want you to be my daughter and fulfill the filial duties of a daughter." Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and pulled Bai Suzhen away, saying, "This guy has gone crazy thinking about his daughter. Follow me and ignore him." However, what surprised him was that Bai Suzhen paused and smiled as she let go of his hand. Then, she bowed to Wei Chuanqiu and said, "Bai Suzhen greets foster father." Silence. The room was instantly so silent that one could hear a pin drop. Yu Qianqiu stared at Bai Suzhen in bewilderment. After a moment of shock, Wei Chuanqiu's body suddenly trembled violently. He burst into wild laughter, tears streaming down his face. After a long while he finally stopped laughing. He took a step forward and placed his hands on Bai Suzhen's shoulders. His eyes were red as he panted heavily. "My good daughter. My good daughter. Don't worry. From today onwards, I will let you become the entire demon race. No, I will let you become the #1 expert in the 3 realms. From today onwards, no one will be able to hurt you. I promise that I will never let anyone hurt you again." As he spoke, he pulled Bai Suzhen into his arms and wailed, "Xiao Yu, it's all father's fault. I shouldn't have left you and your mother behind. I promise you that I won't let anyone harm a single hair on your body in the future." Suddenly being hugged by a strange man like this, Bai Suzhen was at a loss of what to do. Yu Qianqiu's expression was also twitching. He could tell that Wei Chuanqiu was usually quite normal, but once he touched his dead daughter, he would immediately become insane. To put it bluntly, he was suffering from intermittent mental illness. It was the kind of mental illness that would immediately act up when he was stimulated. Damn it. I have eyes but failed to see. How did I get mixed up with a mental patient? Yu Qianqiu took a step forward and pulled Wei Chuanqiu with all his might. "Old bat, let go of me. Men and women should not touch each other. Don't pretend to be sick to take advantage of me." He secretly hit Wei Chuanqiu a few times before he finally released the bear hug in pain. Actually, he didn't want to argue with a mental patient. But no matter how sick you are, you can't hug my woman. Not to mention in front of me. Fortunately, Wei Chuanqiu's illness wasn't serious. After he let go in pain, he immediately knew that he had lost control. He wiped his tears and apologized profusely. It was foster father who lost control. As he said that, He took out the bat jade pendant carved from green jade and handed it to Bai Sujin. "This is foster father's greeting gift. Put it on, put it on." Bai Sujin took it and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She hung the jade pendant on her waist as she was told. Wei Chuanqiu's eyes lit up as he nodded repeatedly and said, "Similar, really similar. Wait a moment." After saying that, he quickly opened the door and disappeared outside the door. Bai Sujin and Yu Qianqiu looked at each other. They didn't know what Wei Chuanqiu wanted them to wait for. In the end, he didn't come back after waiting for a while. Yu Qianqiu held Bai Sujin's hand and shook his head helplessly. "So this old man is sick. It's really hard on you." "It's nothing. Actually, he's quite pitiful." Bai Sujin smiled faintly. Just as the two of them were sighing, the door was suddenly slammed open with a bang. They saw Wei Chuanqiu dragging the furious Big Ming Luan with one hand and the frowning Yin Peng with the other. Wei Chuanqiu pointed at Bai Sujin and said excitedly, "Don't you think they look alike? Old man, are you looking for a beating?" The furious Big Ming Luan took a glance and was instantly stunned. He couldn't move his eyes away from Bai Sujin and cried out involuntarily, "Xiao Yu'er, you, aren't you?" Chapter 901. Even though Yin Peng knew that Bai Sujin wasn't Xiao Yu'er, when he saw Bai Sujin's slender and graceful figure with the bat jade pendant on her waist, he couldn't help but fall into a trance. She was almost exactly the same as the Xiao Yu'er in his memory. It was as if the Xiao Yu'er who smiled and called him third uncle was right in front of him. "She isn't Xiao Yu'er. She just looks like Xiao Yu'er." Yin Peng sighed softly. De Mingluan looked at him in astonishment, so Yin Peng told him the truth in a concise manner. He told him that the person in front of him was called Bai Sujin, and that she was Yu Qianqiu's woman. It was a complete coincidence. Similar, too similar. De Mingluan shook his head and exclaimed. Wei Chuanqiu immediately pointed at the two of them and said to Bai Sujin, "This is your uncle De Mingluan, and this is your third uncle Yin Peng." When the three of them were together, De Mingluan was the eldest, Wei Chuanqiu was the second, and Yin Peng was the third. It coincided with the saying, "A bright moon shines in the sky, green wings and jade wings follow." Bai Sujin had heard of these two people's names from Yu Qianqiu. Since Yu Qianqiu had told her about them, it would not be too much for her to address them as a senior. She immediately bowed to the two of them, first uncle, third uncle Yin. De Mingluan and Yin Peng both inhaled a breath of cold air. They hadn't heard such a familiar form of address for many years. They nodded with some emotion. Good, good, good. Yu Qianqiu stood at the side and looked at one and the other. In the end, he looked at Bai Sujin with a hint of boredom. He was really speechless. He sighed in his heart that Bai Sujin's luck was too good. The moment she arrived in the immortal world, she had a foster father and a first uncle and third uncle. These were three early-stage immortal emperor experts. Especially De Mingluan's identity as the leader of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. It was even more incredible. With these three people protecting her, who would dare to touch Bai Sujin? Yu Qianqiu was happy to see such a situation. However, Yu Qianqiu was a little depressed. Bai Sujin was his woman, and Wei Chuanqiu was now Bai Sujin's adoptive father. Didn't that mean that his status was a generation lower than Wei Chuanqiu's? It seemed like it would be inconvenient for him to make a move on her in the future. The happiest person in the room was none other than Wei Chuanqiu. She was grinning from ear to ear. Yu Qianqiu understood that this mental patient had found spiritual sustenance. He reckoned that he had entrusted his fatherly love, which he had nowhere to vent, to Bai Sujin. It really made one speechless. The lively atmosphere finally ended with the departure of the Great Bright Wheel and Yin Peng. However, Wei Chuanqiu was still looking at Bai Sujin with a smile. The more she looked at her, the more she liked her. Actually, Bai Sujin's appearance and gentle and amiable temperament easily gave people a sense of closeness. This temperament was a reaction from the inside out. It was filled with a tranquility that stood aloof from worldly affairs. It could not be faked. At the side, Yu Qianqiu could not stand it anymore. He coughed and said, "Bat King Wei, stop smiling foolishly. It's time to get to the point. Oh. After Wei Chuanxiu reacted, her smile disappeared and was replaced with a dignified expression. She slowly said to Bai Suzhen, the ancestor of all demons, Tai Shu, wrote the 10,000 Demons Heart Sutra. In the opening chapter, there is a saying that demons also have a Tao. Those who walk the Tao are different from the human Tao. Those who walk the ghost Tao are different from the ghost Tao. Those who walk the devil Tao are different from the devil Tao. Those who cultivate the immortal body, cultivate the myriad transformations technique, and obtain the unfathomable techniques, are called the devil Tao. What's that? Yu Qianqiu was confused. He stretched his head over and asked, there are humans, ghosts, and devils. How can one cultivate such complicated things? It's none of your business. Why are you interrupting? Why are you still here? Wei Chuanxiu glared at him and said, this is the devil Tao. It's not something you can peek at. Scram. I don't want to learn it. I promise I won't interrupt anymore. I'll just listen from the side. Yu Qianqiu smiled apologetically. Are you going to scram or not? Wei Chuanxiu said with a ferocious expression. Fine. Take your time to teach me. I'll scram. Yu Qianqiu nodded and bowed as he retreated. He was purely curious. Actually, he had no intention of secretly learning it. Moreover, this devil Tao was not something he could cultivate. Moreover, it was Bai Suzhen who was learning it. In order not to affect Bai Suzhen, he could only obediently scram. When Bai Suzhen saw his behavior, she could not help but cover her mouth and chuckle. As a result, Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes at her as she walked out of the door. After the door was closed, Wei Chuanxiu was still worried. He consecutively set up a few soundproof enchantments in the room. Then he walked back and said, although I have studied this 1000 Devil Heart Sutra for a long time, I have never cultivated it due to other reasons. However, after 10,000 years of study, I have already memorized the steps of cultivation. It should be able to answer some of your doubts. So I can only impart it to you. As for the cultivation, you still have to rely on yourself. We'll do it step by step. Let's start from the first scroll. Sit down and listen to me slowly. Wei Chuanqiu waved his sleeves. The rattan chairs in the living room moved to the side of the wall. The two of them sat cross-legged. When both of them had calmed down, Wei Chuanqiu began to slowly explain the 1000 Devil Heart Sutra. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing outside the door, looked around for a while. He could not help but look inside through the crack in the door. He really wanted to see what was so special about this grimoire that was left behind by an expert who could be mentioned in the same breath as the devil god. Unfortunately, the two of them sat cross-legged on the floor and listened for a long time. However, they could not hear a single sound. They could not help but fling their sleeves and leave resentfully. The cultivation world and the human world had already calmed down. Due to the strong restrictions of the lords of the various countries all withdrew their disciples and strictly ordered them not to go out and cause trouble. They could only concentrate on cultivating in their sections. In the Chinese cultivation world, the Green sect and the Hong sect, the two big sects, passed down Yu Qianqiu's decree and forcefully interfered. This also forced everyone to stop fighting with the various countries. At this point, the whole cultivation world and the human world had entered an unprecedented peace. Due to the absence of the cultivation world's interference, China's new aristocratic Shi dynasty also began to fearlessly rectify the people's lives. China, which had been plunged into the flames of war, entered a state of recuperation. Corvée labor was reduced, taxes were reduced, and the people happily welcomed the new dynasty. Deep in the wilderness of China, on the main peak of the undulating mountain range, there was a majestic building complex. This was the #1 sect of the Devil Tao, the 10,000 Demons. In the old forest behind the majestic building, there was a lonely house built against the mountain. This was the place where the previous leader of the 10,000 Demons, Yan Wuchen, cultivated. A gust of autumn wind blew, and the yellow leaves on the treetops fluttered into the courtyard. A young disciple of the 10,000 Demons, who had been in charge of serving the previous leader, was sweeping the fallen leaves in the courtyard with a large broom. The sound of the sweeping echoed in the quiet courtyard. Yen Wuchen, who was dressed in black, stood on the steps of the house. His white hair danced slightly in the autumn wind. He stood quietly on the steps and stared at the young disciple who was sweeping the floor without blinking. Yen Wuchen sighed softly, either because he suddenly thought of something or because he had a feeling in his heart. At this moment, a figure landed outside the courtyard. Qiu Wuyuan strode in. When he passed by the young disciple, he suddenly stopped and said, "Shouchen, I haven't seen you for a long time. Where have you been?" The young disciple stopped and bowed. "Uncle Master, you must be joking. I've been serving the Grandmaster here. Where else could I go? Maybe I didn't see you every time you came." He was the disciple of the current leader of the 10,000 demons, Bu Yinxiao. He was sent here by his master to serve the Grandmaster. Hearing this, Qiu Wuyuan didn't mind. He nodded and walked straight to Yen Wuchen, who was on the steps of the main house. When he reached the bottom of the steps, he bowed and said, "Master, I'm ashamed. I've sent many people to the various countries to ask around, but I couldn't find any news about eldest senior brother and the others. I don't even know where they are hiding." Now that the cultivation world of the various countries was at peace with each other, there was no longer any hostility between them. This gave Qiu Wuyuan the opportunity to send people to find out about Yen Bugui and his sons. If it was in the past, the Chinese cultivation world wouldn't have dared to walk around the various countries. Sigh. Yen Wuchen sighed softly and said, "Wuyuan, I appreciate your kindness, but they only have themselves to blame. Whether they live or die, let them be. You don't have to worry about them anymore." "How can I do that?" Qiu Wuyuan said respectfully. "Eldest senior brother is Master's only son, and Zhui Xing is your only grandson. No matter how many mistakes they have made, they are still your only bloodline. Others can ignore them, but I can't." With a wave of his hand, a black crescent moon that was 1 meter long and nearly 2 meters wide appeared in front of him. The black crescent moon was cold and frightening, but its sharp blade shone with a cold blue light mixed with red shadows. Its surface was engraved with all kinds of strange patterns. This was a treasure that Yen Wuchen had unintentionally picked up all those years ago. Although its origins were unknown, it was incomparably sharp, and it had helped Yen Wuchen gain a fearsome reputation back then. He had treated it as a top-notch magical treasure, and Yen Wuchen had named it the Black Moon Pagoda. Qiu Wuyuan continued, "This Black Moon Pagoda is Master's personal treasure. Master once said that you want the Yen family to pass it down from generation to generation. I've always remembered these words." Just as the Black Moon Pagoda appeared, the sweeping sounds in the courtyard stopped for a moment. Shouchen's eyes shone with a strange light as he stared at the floating Black Moon Pagoda. Then he lowered his head and continued sweeping. However, his actions were all seen by Yen Wuchen, who was constantly paying attention to him. Yen Wuchen furrowed his brows and glared at Qiu Wuhui angrily. "Since I've already passed it to you, then I have my reasons for passing it to you. Don't waste your breath here. Put it away and scram. Without my summons, you are not allowed to come here again." Qiu Wuyuan was stunned. It had been a long time since Master lost his temper with him. He didn't know what was wrong with him today. He wanted to say something, but seeing that Master was really angry, he cupped his hands and said, "Yes." Then, he put away the Black Moon Pagoda, turned around respectfully, and left obediently. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.